A smug older nobleman stands triumphantly while a young woman waits silently in the background. The young blonde woman stares forward with a stoic and unwavering expression. She blinks in mild surprise as a sudden thought interrupts her quiet demeanor. Greeting her father after a long absence, she calmly explains her single-room home while he cruelly dismisses it as a mere shanty. She recalls a peaceful childhood living alongside her mother and her distant Count father until she turned 13. Now, she resides completely alone in the isolated forest warden's cottage. Stripped of her dresses and jewels by the new madam, she found herself banished to a tiny, solitary room. Enduring violent abuse because her calm resilience infuriated the madam, she was permanently exiled from the manor to this cottage 4 years ago. Her tragic downfall began a mere month after her mother's death, when her father's mistress Irene and her daughters usurped the manor. Finding refuge in exile, she learned the crucial survival skills needed to live in harmony with the surrounding forest. She considers herself incredibly fortunate to have been taken in by the kind old forest warden named Grandpa Ron. Staring back at her painful past, she admits those years of sudden abandonment were the hardest of her life. Looking out at the sunlit trees, she reflects on the loss of Grandpa Ron, who passed away 2 years ago. Warm memories flood her mind as she remembers the genuine happiness she felt living alongside the wardens in this humble home. Interrupting her peaceful life, her father coldly commands her to rejoice over an arranged marriage to a 24-year-old man. Her spoiled stepsister suddenly appears, mockingly praising the sautéed meal while feigning a polite familial greeting. Maintaining her polite composure, she explains her survival diet of trapped venison and wild forest greens. Ignoring the superficial chatter, she cuts straight to the core issue and demands the identity of her prospective husband. Suspicion immediately rises within her, questioning why a legitimate marriage proposal would target someone who never even debuted in society. Her stepsister gleefully reveals the groom is Lord Alfred Granville, the handsome ruler of the prosperous market of Garland in the northern borderlands. A sinister catch quickly emerges as the stepsister begins listing the Marquis's highly specific and unusual conditions for his bride. Laughing maliciously, the stepsister reveals that Lord Alfred is a scarred, woman-hating noble living in a dangerous territory swarming with magical beasts. The harsh reality sets in that the Marquis is completely unwilling, marrying solely out of some reluctant obligation. Reading the degrading contract, she learns she must be over 18, bear no heirs, avoid social appearances, and expect a divorce within 1 year. Realizing her father sold her for a massive 10 million Ordo advance fund, she notes that the Marquis allows the bride to arrive completely empty-handed. The stepsister delivers a final venomous strike, mocking her as a pitiful, temporary trophy wife destined to be discarded. She quietly accepts the grim truth that her corrupt father traded her life away for a simple, lucrative financial transaction. Flaunting her own impending happiness, the stepsister casually drops the name of Lord Arthur, sparking a flicker of shocked recognition. Having delivered her devastating news, the stepsister smugly turns her back and abandons her to this bleak fate. Despite the humiliation, she pragmatically views this contract marriage as a far better escape route than being sold off as an old man's concubine. Digging into her faded memories, she suddenly remembers that Lord Arthur was actually her own childhood fiancé from the neighboring county. Her father abruptly dictates that she will depart in exactly 1 week, having already finalized the one-sided agreement. Any attempt to voice her concerns is instantly crushed as he violently demands her utter silence. She calmly points out the impossible logistics of preparing for a noble wedding in a mere 7 days. Enraged by her logical pushback, the cowardly Count flinches and stumbles backward defensively. Her piercing, emotionless gaze locks onto her pathetic father, silently judging his transparent greed. Scrambling away in pathetic fear, her father shrieks at her to just shut up and marry while the stepsister rushes to his aid. Recovering his arrogant composure, her father refuses to spend real money on her, insisting she travel empty-handed with only 1 cheap dress. Denied a proper bridal trousseau or wedding gown, she simply bows her head and accepts the rushed 1-week deadline. Her father coldly reminds her that she is nothing but a worthless placeholder for a marquis who only desires the legal status of marriage. Clenching her hand, she correctly deduces that her greedy father plans to pocket the entire fortune without spending a single coin on her wedding. She visualizes the bare minimum preparations she will have to piece together by herself to maintain a shred of dignity. A surprising spark of genuine optimism takes hold as she boldly declares she is looking forward to her impending marriage. Her thoughts drift in gratitude toward Marion, the loyal servant who secretly smuggled bread to her during her harshest days of exile. Armed with total self-reliance, she assures herself that even if the marriage fails, she can always survive by hunting. The thrilling prospect of a new life far away from her family's abusive, watchful eyes fills her with a quiet, powerful anticipation. The loyal servant Marian weeps over the cruel injustice of the situation, mourning the happy aristocratic life her lady was so violently denied. Marian gently grasps her lady's hands, offering a tender and sorrowful vow of loyalty amidst the tragedy. Smiling with deep, genuine warmth, she thanks Marian for repaying her late mother's kindness with years of unwavering care. Embracing this bittersweet farewell, she offers a final, comforting smile to the weeping woman who acted as her only true family. Offering a gentle and reassuring smile, the young blonde woman comforts her weeping servant, telling Marian not to cry. Stepping outside the rustic forest cottage, she pauses on the overgrown path and takes one final look back at her humble home. Standing beneath the towering trees, she gazes up at the bright, full moon illuminating the dark canopy above. Her thoughts drift toward the unknown future as she wonders what the mysterious Garland Market is truly like. Closing her eyes with a peaceful smile, she ponders the Marquis's character while hoping the new territory holds tasty herbs and familiar prey, already planning to survive on the estate's outskirts even after the inevitable divorce. She harbors a quiet, gentle hope that even a loveless marriage might eventually blossom into a genuine friendship. Water pours steadily into an ornate bathtub, preparing a long-overdue cleansing for the exiled noblewoman. Sniffing her collar with a mild wince, she realizes her clothes reek of wild animals. Acknowledging her thin but resilient frame, she reflects on how long she has survived without a proper bath or mirror. Confronting the cruel Madame Irene and her stepsister, she politely greets her stepmother, only to be instantly met with a vicious command to drop the title. Madame Irene glares down with sheer contempt, cruelly declaring how refreshing it feels knowing her stepdaughter will finally vanish tomorrow. The young woman lowers her gaze, completely unfazed by the venomous insult hurled her way. Remaining perfectly composed, she softly fires back that she feels the exact same relief about their impending separation. Madame Irene's eyes narrow into a furious, calculating glare behind her ornate folding fan. Snapping her fan shut with explosive rage, the stepmother snarls at the quiet defiance of the exiled daughter. Unshaken by the hostile atmosphere, the young woman resolutely declares her eager anticipation for the new land awaiting her. A subtle, confident smile graces her features, proving that her spirit remains completely unbroken. Warm memories resurface as she envisions her beautiful, elegant mother standing radiantly in a gorgeous gown. Accepting the permanent end of her old life, she embraces the reality of departing for a distant territory tomorrow. Inspecting her horrifically oversized wedding dress, she realizes the ridiculously baggy garment will only bring utter shame upon the house. Her attention suddenly shifts toward another, completely different garment lying nearby. Determined to salvage her dignity, she grabs the humble sewing kit retrieved from her forest cottage and prepares to alter the dress. A sudden knock interrupts her thoughts as she begins deducing exactly who managed to sneak this mysterious dress into her room. Marian silently slips into the room, addressing her beloved lady with quiet devotion. Examining the secret gown, she marvels at the proper stitching and perfect fit, questioning why only this dress possesses such high quality. Sitting confidently on the bed, she decides to personally alter the oversized wedding dress since the length requires drastic adjustments anyway. Stepping forward with sorrowful eyes, the loyal maid reveals she came to bid her final, heartfelt farewell. The young woman pauses her sewing, deeply moved by Marian's emotional devotion. Brushing off the late hour, Marian insists on helping, considering this the final honorable task she can perform for her lady. Warning that the alterations might take all night, she gladly accepts Marian's eager offer to help. Marian beams with radiant joy as her lady graciously accepts the much-needed assistance. The young woman silently reflects that Marian's enduring kindness is the only reason she never lost her humanity in this abusive house. Displaying the newly tailored gown, she happily praises the stunning result, calling it the most beautiful dress in the world. Holding up a small accessory box, Marian insists that wearing its contents will elevate the outfit to true perfection. Marian carefully opens the velvet box, revealing a hidden treasure concealed within. She gasps in pure astonishment as the lid reveals a breathtaking, flower-shaped necklace and matching earrings. Clenching the fabric of her dress, She chokes back tears upon realizing this jewelry is the sole remaining keepsake of her late mother. Overwhelmed by the priceless gift, she deeply thanks the weeping maid for preserving something far greater than money. A profound sense of peace washes over her as she marvels that a piece of her mother's legacy actually survived the purge. Swearing a fierce vow to find true happiness, she shares a tearful, emotional blessing with her loyal servant. Startled by a sudden noise, she peers out and spots her stepsister Layla approaching the carriage. Dawn breaks over the grand manor as the morning of her departure finally arrives. Blinking in mild surprise, she wonders if her typically cruel stepsister actually came down to see her off. Layla nervously fidgets while glancing at the beautifully altered dress. Struggling to formulate a compliment, Layla awkwardly admits that the tailored clothes make her look somewhat like a proper noble. Feigning haughty superiority, Layla claims she only intervened because a shabby sister would reflect poorly on her. Turning away quickly to hide her face, Layla delivers a surprisingly sincere farewell and wishes her sister a happy life. The peaceful moment shatters as their screeching stepsister demands Layla hurry up so they can retreat indoors. Smiling with genuine warmth, she bids Layla farewell and wishes her a joyful future alongside Lord Peter. Radiating unshakable confidence, she steps toward her new destiny, boldly promising to forge her own happiness with the Marquis. Realizing her stepsister is marrying Peter instead of Lord Arthur, Flora admits the two men look nothing alike. This shocking revelation leaves her completely bewildered about the sudden mix-up. Pouting in adorable frustration, she struggles to make sense of the tangled web of arranged marriages. Waiting patiently outside the estate, she realizes it has been years since she last left the grounds. She braces herself to finally meet a member of the Granville family. The grand, sprawling southern territory of the Garland Market finally comes into view. A handsome, impeccably dressed man approaches the carriage and politely asks to open the door. He introduces himself with a warm, welcoming smile and expresses his pleasure at making her acquaintance. Pausing in sheer surprise, the man notes her complete lack of a personal maid. He formally introduces himself as the butler, Cyril, prompting Flora to gratefully introduce herself in return. Glancing at her single trunk, Cyril confirms she traveled entirely alone. Covering his shock, Cyril politely notes that they did permit the bride to arrive empty-handed. Flushing slightly, Flora realizes her meager luggage makes it blatantly obvious she is relying on the Margrave for everything. Brushing past the awkwardness, Cyril smoothly gestures toward a waiting estate carriage. Touched by his gentle demeanor, Flora praises the butler's generous kindness. Cyril proudly explains that the market boasts perfectly paved roads and highly capable carriage horses. Flora gazes out the carriage window, mesmerized by the pristine territory unfolding before her. Praising his master, Cyril calls Lord Alfred a truly admirable figure worthy of deep respect. Flora agrees that he must be a remarkable lord. Flora genuinely admires the current Marquis's dedicated effort to maintain the sprawling roads. Catching himself, Cyril apologizes for planting preconceptions, knowing the dark rumors surrounding his master. A somber shadow crosses Cyril's face as he ominously trails off regarding Lord Alfred's role as a husband. The ornate carriage rattles forward, carrying the solitary bride deeper into the massive estate. Smiling with genuine optimism, Flora declares she looks forward to meeting the Lord and judging him for herself. Gazing up at the looming fortress, she rationalizes that anyone respected by the considerate Cyril cannot be a terrible person. The breathtaking, heavily fortified castle of the Garland Market dominates the mountainous horizon. Anticipation quickly morphs into nervous tension as the moment of their fateful meeting finally arrives. Flora stands rigidly inside the grand manor, her heart pounding with anxious uncertainty. A servant directs her to wait patiently inside the lavish, sunlit reception room. Towering Gothic windows filter the bright daylight, casting long shadows across the elegant chamber. A sudden, commanding voice cuts through the silence, ordering her to stay exactly as she is. The heavy doors swing open as the imposing figure steps into the room and excuses himself. Intricate tailoring and aristocratic elegance frame the broad chest of the arriving nobleman. Flora looks up, her eyes widening as she takes in her formidable new husband. A striking, intensely serious man stares back at her, his sharp features commanding the room. Meeting his piercing gaze, Flora internally confirms that this intimidating man is indeed Lord Alfred. A prominent, jagged scar slices across his brow, cementing his fierce and battle-hardened reputation. The fearsome lord remains perfectly still, silently confirming her unspoken assumption. Maintaining her aristocratic poise, Flora formally introduces herself as the eldest daughter of Count Craig Astley. Without a hint of warmth, he firmly introduces himself as Alfred Granville. Flora delicately sips her tea, using the polite gesture to steady her racing nerves. Alfred formally welcomes her to the estate, thanking her for making the long journey. Flora confidently assures him that she arrived fully aware of the strict conditions binding their marriage. Cutting straight to the point, Alfred sternly verifies that she accepts the brutal terms of their contract. A heavy, suffocating silence stretches between them as the gravity of their loveless pact settles in. Seated miles apart in the vast room, the newly minted couple drinks their tea in stiff, awkward formality. Alfred's sharp, calculating eye locks onto her, searching for any sign of hesitation. Flora calmly admits she lacks the exact details but remains resolved to see this through. Leaning in slightly, Alfred bluntly asks if her acceptance includes the terrifying rumors surrounding his name. Flora nods in understanding, astutely noting that he makes no effort to deny his dark reputation. Abruptly shifting gears, Alfred brings up the logistical details of their impending wedding ceremony. He coldly dictates that he will never share a bed with her, preferring to sleep alone in his inner office. Processing the harsh reality, Flora realizes her corrupt father heavily manipulated the truth of this arrangement. Alfred explains that her father requested a hidden, private chapel ceremony to avoid public shame when the inevitable divorce occurs. Accepting her rushed wedding, Flora calmly notes that the only people she wanted to see her bridal attire are already gone. Alfred formally apologizes for the abrupt schedule, revealing that the ceremony will take place as soon as tomorrow. Processing his rigid demeanor, Flora astutely deduces that the Marquis does not truly wish for this marriage. Granted permission to speak, she politely asks a question before pledging herself to his guidance. Alfred bluntly explains the one-year contract exists only because a foolish law forcing nobles to marry will soon be abolished. The scarred lord watches her with an intense, unreadable gaze as he lays out the cold reality. Puzzled by the specific time frame, Flora curiously asks why he settled on exactly 1 year. He confesses his reluctance to adopt an heir, deeming it far too cruel to separate young candidates from their parents. Piecing the politics together, Flora realizes the kingdom mandates unwed lords over 25 to immediately marry or adopt. Alfred solemnly declares his desire for a future heir to claim the household willingly once they reach an age of discernment. Listening to his thoughtful reasoning, Flora silently realizes this supposedly intimidating man is actually quite kind. A soft gasp escapes her lips as the misunderstood noble's true, honorable nature finally reveals itself. Her peaceful moment shatters instantly with a confused squeak as she struggles to process his next unexpected statement. Alfred warns that unforeseen circumstances might delay the law's repeal, offering compensation if he must extend their marriage. Seizing the opportunity to clarify her future, she asks permission to pose one final question. The formidable lord keeps his piercing gaze locked entirely on her, silently allowing her to continue. A grand, ornate chandelier gleams brightly overhead, illuminating the heavy negotiation unfolding in the vast room. She cautiously asks who else in the massive estate knows their marriage will inevitably end in divorce. A gentle, knowing smile forms on her face as she listens to his surprisingly small circle of trust. Alfred reveals that only the recuperating head butler and his grandson, Cyril, know the truth of their temporary arrangement. Leaning back into his luxurious chair, the imposing Marquis commands the room with effortless authority. Checking for any lingering doubts, he firmly asks if she has any more questions regarding their contract. Flora stares back quietly, carefully weighing the gravity of his straightforward attitude. The scarred lord awaits her response, his sharp features locked in deadly seriousness. Delivering a harsh strike, Alfred explicitly vows never to love her and expects minimal interaction between them. Unfazed by his icy declaration, Flora politely declines to ask anything else. His eyes narrow slightly as he emphasizes his need to make these cruel boundaries perfectly clear in advance. Flora accepts his blunt honesty, reasonably pointing out that a 1-year limit already implied a loveless dynamic. Despite her rational acceptance, she silently admits that hearing her rejection stated so plainly feels a little lonely. Softening his harsh stance, he promises she will live completely free from hardship and expresses genuine gratitude for her compliance. His hardened face remains perfectly still as he finishes dictating the terms of her comfortable but isolated future. Shrugging off the romantic rejection, she resolves to enjoy her year fully, concluding that he is a remarkably considerate person. The fearsome Marquis watches her in total silence, absorbing her surprisingly resilient reaction. Flashing a bright, radiant smile, she cheerfully thanks him for his consideration and welcomes his guidance. He stares back at her joyful expression, completely disarmed by her unshakable optimism. Cyril graciously escorts the new bride to her room, leaving Flora absolutely stunned by the lavish bedroom. Kicking off her formal manners, she excitedly lifts the hem of her heavy dress. She quickly abandons her elegant shoes, leaving them neatly on the floor. With a joyful leap, she throws herself backward onto the massive, inviting mattress. Her eyes sparkle with pure, overwhelming bliss as she sinks into the incredibly soft bedding. Pressing her hands into the warm, fluffy eiderdown quilt, she marvels at a bed so luxurious it could spoil a person. A sudden, polite knock at the door pulls her away from her joyful exploration. A beautiful, elegant maid steps into the room, carrying herself with impeccable grace. Bowing respectfully, the servant introduces herself as Lana and formally takes charge of attending to the new lady. Lana politely excuses herself, stepping out momentarily to prepare a welcoming pot of tea. Touched by the respectful treatment, Flora sweetly thanks the beautiful maid for her polite introduction. Returning quickly, Lana elegantly serves an exquisite tea set for her lady. Staring down at the delicate sweets, Flora feels as though she has stumbled into an unbelievable luxury. Taking a tiny bite, she instantly marvels at the incredibly delicious flavor melting on her tongue. A blissful, heartwarming smile stretches across her face as she happily devours the sweet strawberry tart. A beautiful blonde noblewoman gasps in delight as her dark-haired maid offers to soothe her heavy travel fatigue with a warm bath before dinner. The diligent maid smiles softly with genuine warmth while anticipating her lady's decision. Overjoyed by the prospect, the noblewoman excitedly declares she has never experienced the luxury of a hot spring before. The maid calmly explains the vast bathing facilities include both a private room bath and a massive first-floor bathhouse. They enter a grand, elegantly furnished changing room adorned with large mirrors and ornate dressers. Undressing, the lady blushes deeply and bashfully admits it feels embarrassing to have someone help her undress as an adult. She steps forward timidly, clutching a towel securely around her chest to hide her shyness. Entering the grand bathhouse, she stares in absolute awe at the steaming, expansive pool stretching out before her. The maid patiently guides the awestruck noblewoman toward the stone seating of the bathing area. Trembling with anticipation to finally soak, the lady happily complies as the maid asks her to lean back into the washing chair. The maid gently pours a fragrant mixture over her head, explaining that the water is slightly diluted with honey to nourish the hair. The warm, sweet-scented liquid cascades luxuriously through her golden locks as she marvels at the strange but wonderful sensation. Closing her eyes in pure bliss, she sighs heavily and notes how incredibly soothing the thorough treatment feels. The diligent maid continues washing her lady's back with expert, rhythmic care. Thick, luxurious suds lather gracefully into the noblewoman's long hair under the maid's gentle, practiced hands. After politely declining further assistance, the lady eagerly asks if she may finally immerse herself in the steaming water. The maid respectfully steps back with a bow, announcing she has completely finished washing her lady's hair. Slipping into the bath with a contented sigh, the noblewoman beams with absolute joy and declares she is in the best mood possible. Her slender legs glide gracefully through the warm, rippling water as the tension melts from her muscles. Overwhelmed by the intense decadence, she leans against the stone edge and wonders aloud if it is truly all right to indulge in such incredible luxury. The maid warmly reassures her master that she has full permission to use this magnificent bath whenever she desires. Smiling softly, the maid adds that seeing her lady so happy and smiling puts her own heart at ease. Catching herself speaking too informally, the maid quickly bows her head and offers a polite apology. A gentle, reassuring smile graces the maid's composed face despite her brief breach of formality. The noblewoman stares thoughtfully at her devoted servant through the thick, rising steam of the bath. She notes internally how incredibly kind her maid looks whenever she allows herself to smile. Acknowledging that Lana the maid might not be able to express her emotions freely, the lady confesses that seeing her smile puts her own heart at ease. Beaming brightly, the noblewoman vows to do her absolute best to be a good mistress and wishes for a wonderful year together. The lady's tone grows slightly serious as she asks Lana if she knows the complex political circumstances behind this sudden marriage. The grand dining room stands impeccably furnished, boasting a massive crystal chandelier and an expansive scenic painting. Lana humbly admits her own inexperience regarding the situation but earnestly looks forward to serving and working with her new lady. The maid stands attentively in her pristine uniform, ready to assist her mistress with the lavish evening meal. As she prepares to eat, the lady worries about Lord Alfred, noting that he takes his meals much later in the evening, which is bad for digestion. Her eyes suddenly widen and sparkle beautifully as she catches sight of the magnificent feast laid out before her. A mouth-watering spread of thick sizzling steak, roasted vegetables, hearty soup, and warm bread glimmers temptingly on the dining table. The lady sits quietly in her refined evening gown, utterly stunned by the incredibly lavish culinary presentation. Blushing with sheer delight after taking her very first bite, she repeats over and over how incredibly delicious the food is. Floating in a state of utter culinary bliss, she savors every rich flavor as it melts perfectly on her tongue. Empty white plates and a completely drained wine glass stand as a proud testament to her thoroughly enjoyed meal. Grabbing her happily full stomach, she playfully chides herself in a panic for eating entirely too greedily. Retiring to her quiet room, she reflects somberly that because she believed she wasn't truly desired, she assumed absolutely anyone would do as a partner. She closes her eyes softly, letting the heavy weight of her past anxieties wash away in the comforting silence of her new home. Her mind happily reels as she lists her unexpected new blessings, including a kind maid, soft bed, anytime baths, and meals so delicious her taste buds might burst. She burrows deeply and comfortably into the impossibly soft, plush pillows of her massive new bed. Staring directly up at the grand ceiling, a powerful and heartwarming realization suddenly strikes her core. Soft imaginary floral patterns frame her serene, blushing face as she rests peacefully in the dim light. Overcome with immense gratitude and relief, she whispers out loud that she is truly glad she came here. A single, beautiful tear of overwhelming joy seems to glisten brightly at the corner of her resting eye. She rolls over lazily in absolute comfort, letting her delicate nightgown drape heavily over the vast mattress. A stunning, flashback vision of her in a gorgeously detailed floral wedding dress flashes by as a maid sincerely compliments her breathtaking beauty. The delicate silver necklace belonging to Flora's mother gleams softly in the bright light. Adorned in a beautiful floral wedding dress, Flora smiles softly as she wishes her parents could see her bridal appearance. Outside the grand doors, Lord Alfred stands tall and imposing in his pristine formal wedding attire. Lana the maid smiles warmly and reassuringly as she assists the nervous bride. Lord Alfred carefully adjusts his pristine cravat with a stoic and unreadable expression on his handsome face. Flora stares in awe at her soon-to-be husband, marveling that he looks exactly like a holy knight straight out of a picture book. His sharp and piercing gaze locks forward as he prepares for the momentous ceremony ahead. Breaking the heavy silence, Lord Alfred formally requests Flora to give him her hand. Flora gazes up with wide and sparkling eyes as she attentively listens to his sudden request. She nervously notes his heavily furrowed brow and worries intensely about his current mood. Walking arm in arm down the grand hall, Flora admits to herself that she still knows very little about the man she is marrying. Her heart races anxiously as she struggles to keep up with his brisk and unrelenting pace. Catching the hem of her heavy gown, she panics and cries out to Lord Alfred as she begins to trip forward. In a flash of movement, Lord Alfred swiftly turns and extends a steadying arm to catch her falling frame. The nearby servants gasp in utter shock at the sudden and clumsy stumble. Towering pillars frame the magnificent church interior as they finally approach the grand altar just ahead. Lord Alfred grips her securely to prevent the fall as Flora lets out a startled gasp. Their faces suddenly come incredibly close together, leaving both the bride and groom flustered by the unexpected intimacy. Releasing his grip slightly, Lord Alfred formally apologizes for hurrying too much without considering her heavy dress. They carefully compose themselves and step forward to finalize their union at the holy altar. Lord Alfred maintains a rigid and stoic expression as he stands before the waiting priest. Flora stares up anxiously at the imposing figure of the priest conducting their ceremony. The priest raises his hands and formally announces the beginning of their sacred wedding ceremony under God's guidance. The officiant directly addresses bridegroom Alfred and asks if he swears to deeply love and cherish Flora. A kindly bearded priest smiles warmly as he recites the sacred vows from his heavy tome. The priest humorously adds her recent tripping incident into the traditional vows regarding times of joy, sorrow, and divine trials. Looking completely exasperated by the priest's teasing, Lord Alfred sighs heavily and swears his sacred vow. The ceremony progresses smoothly to the sacred exchange of vows and the presentation of the wedding bands. Lord Alfred gently grasps the delicate wedding ring between his gloved fingers. He carefully slides the beautiful shining ring onto Flora's slender finger to seal their holy union. Flora realizes with a pang of sadness that he dislikes women so intensely, he skipped the traditional ceremonial kiss. She solemnly reminds herself that this cold and distant marriage is destined to end in exactly 1 year. Waiting nervously in her grand bedroom, Flora wears only a delicate nightgown as per the traditional wedding night customs. She blushes deeply while pondering how intensely vulnerable a woman must present herself to her new husband. A sudden click echoes from the hallway, causing Flora to jolt upright and wonder if Lord Alfred has finally arrived. She places a nervous hand over her racing heart and stares intently toward the heavy bedroom doors. The grand room remains agonizingly quiet as she waits in the dim and flickering light. Laying her head back against the pillows, she realizes it has been a very long time since she shared a space with anyone at night. The ornate chandelier casts long and quiet shadows across the lavish ceiling as the minutes slowly tick by. Sinking deeper into the luxurious mattress, she sighs softly and marvels at how incredibly comfortable it feels. She finds unexpected solace in simply sensing another person's presence nearby, even if they never actually spend the night together. Drifting off to sleep with a peaceful smile, Flora decides that this distant but secure relationship might not be so bad after all. The next morning, a dedicated tailor and Lana the maid assist Flora in trying on a stunning array of elegant new dresses. The entire following day passes in an absolute blur of frantic and luxurious activities. Flora stands quietly near the massive estate doors as she takes in the sheer scale of her new life. Slumping exhausted onto a plush sofa, she feels incredibly guilty that Lord Alfred continues buying her lavish clothes and jewels for a marriage lasting only 1 year. The elegant lamps and grand chandeliers illuminate the opulent manor as evening approaches once again. Filled with immense gratitude, Flora firmly resolves that she needs to properly thank her husband for his overwhelming generosity. She perks up instantly at the distinct sound of heavy footsteps approaching her location. The heavy wooden door creaks open to reveal a pair of polished men's shoes stepping into the room. Glancing over his shoulder with a sharp gaze, the black-haired husband asks if she needs something. Gripping the doorframe with white-knuckled hesitation, she struggles to voice her racing thoughts. Standing nervously in her flowing nightgown, Lana desperately searches for the courage to speak her mind. She argues that buying her jewelry is excessive since she avoids capital parties, but he smoothly counters that these purchases are for dresses and shoes. Turning away into the shadows, he bluntly dismisses her gratitude by stating she already thanked him this morning. Staring silently at his retreating back, she rapidly processes his painfully practical dismissal. Bowing her head softly in the quiet hallway, she murmurs her complete understanding of the situation. He insists it is crucial for her to be properly dressed for her high status, firmly telling her not to go out of her way to thank him. Declaring her presence as his wife warrants fair compensation, he commands her to freely spend her generous monthly allowance. Smiling with newfound warmth, she graciously accepts his straightforward words and his deeply hidden kindness. Realizing the brutal harshness of his delivery, he silently curses his incredibly poor wording. Bowing her head respectfully once more, she expresses her deep and genuine gratitude for his care. He firmly urges her to spend her precious time doing absolutely whatever she likes. Recalling his earlier harshness, she nervously asks if he meant she looked shabby, while he bluntly orders her to eat more and gain weight. Staring at him in sheer confusion, she wonders if his new physical demands connect directly to his morning insults. Panicking fiercely at her dark misinterpretation, he desperately denies her assumption while she earnestly vows to gain the weight. A devastatingly gentle, deeply affectionate smile finally breaks across his usually stoic and unreadable face. Beaming with a radiantly flushed smile, Lana glows with undeniable, heart-fluttering happiness. Gently clarifying his true intentions, he softly explains that gaining a bit more flesh will simply keep her much healthier. Nodding cheerfully in agreement, she thoroughly understands his deeply caring, protective sentiment. She cleverly declares that spending her allowance will keep the domain's economy moving by directly enriching the local tailor, shoemaker, and jeweler. Reflecting on his actions, she realizes he is actually a kind person whose bluntly straightforward nature just makes him incredibly hard to read. Smiling confidently to herself, she definitively shatters the dark, swirling rumors surrounding his fearsome reputation. Snuggling deep into her plush covers, she giggles happily at the delightful thought of her surprisingly gentle husband. Meanwhile, his intense, shadowy gaze reflects a quiet, fiercely protective observation of his joyous new bride. Pondering their interaction, she happily admits to herself that she has witnessed a completely new, softer side of him too. Greeted brightly by her maids the next morning, she acknowledges her luxurious life but immediately identifies one glaring, unavoidable problem. Pouting in utter boredom, she laments having absolutely nothing to do since she leaves in a year and has zero social obligations. Desperate to break the stifling monotony, someone cleverly suggests taking a brisk, refreshing walk around the grand estate. Catching on to her restless predicament, a wavy-haired aide steps up to enthusiastically entertain the idle madam. Beaming with eager excitement, she thanks the staff while noting that a larger entourage makes everything infinitely more enjoyable. Stepping forward with a smooth, polite bow, the eager aide volunteers to personally accompany her on the grand tour. Gazing around in absolute awe, Lana marvels at the breathtakingly vast scale of the sprawling estate beyond the wedding chapel. Brilliant sunlight filters dynamically through the lush, vibrant foliage framing the imposing stone walls of the castle grounds. The sharp-eyed maid points out the estate's edges, highlighting the night barracks heavily fortified to violently repel magical beasts. Gesturing proudly outward, the aide introduces the northernmost region as the bustling domain capital of Elyon. Lana deduces this strategic positioning targets the magical beasts, and the aide confirms the castle acts as the ultimate shield against the northern mountains. Assuming she fears the looming monstrous danger, the aide rushes to comfort her, but Lana instantly shuts down his misconception. Connecting the tactical dots, she realizes the fortress was deliberately placed in the direct line of fire to fiercely protect the domain's citizens. Her eyes widening in a profound epiphany, Lana finally understands that she is also one of the precious lives he is actively protecting. Ignited by a fierce new resolve, she decides that divorcing him after 1 year means absolutely nothing if she can prove useful to his noble cause. She gazes out with deep reverence, honoring the successive generations of his brave family who have bled to protect this very land. A powerful, sweeping breeze rustles the tranquil, sun-dappled woods standing tall around the impenetrable fortress. The young aide stares at her in absolute awe, totally mesmerized by the sudden, breathtaking strength and clarity shining in her eyes. Brushing her wind-blown hair back with a radiant smile, Lana passionately admits she loves the wild forests much more than she ever realized. Snapping out of his stunned daze, the flushed aide warmly expresses his deep, genuine gladness at her newfound joy. Walking briskly beside her, the observant maid happily notes that the madam's previously low spirits have dramatically soared. Spotting a unique cluster of vibrant flora along the path, the staff excitedly points out a thriving patch of carmine grass. Watching her beautiful, lively reactions, the loyal staff feel an overwhelming surge of relief that Lana has finally started to genuinely smile. Suddenly blinking in pure shock, the aide and the maid stare blankly as an unexpected question about whether something is delicious shatters the peaceful silence. Beaming with joy, Flora cheerfully declares that the carmine grass is absolutely delicious when boiled. She happily explains that the forest overflows with tasty treats like wild strawberries and gummy berries once the weather warms up. Observing their stunned silence, she innocently assumes that Lana and Cyril have simply never eaten the wild plants before. The trio quickly dives into an eager debate, voting to pair the wild strawberry jam with yogurt, freshly baked croissants, or sweet cookies. Sparkling with radiant excitement, Flora eagerly agrees that every single suggestion sounds absolutely wonderful. Placing a hand gracefully against her chin, she hums softly while deciding that all the delicious options are terribly hard to choose between. Bursting with bright enthusiasm, she suggests they all venture into the forest together to pick and eat every single berry once the season arrives. Hearing the cheerful invitation, Lana's previously guarded expression softens into a look of pleasant, wide-eyed surprise. Glowing with newfound warmth, Flora deeply cherishes her fun conversations with Lana and Cyril while wishing she could grow closer to Lord Alfred too. Suddenly spotting something off-camera, her eyes sparkle brightly as she blurts out that it looks incredibly tasty. Glancing down at a cute, chubby ratana bird waddling through the grass, her innocent remark takes on a suddenly terrifying context. Blushing furiously, she shrinks back in deep embarrassment, sheepishly admitting that her ravenous comment was far too gluttonous. Completely dumbfounded, Cyril and Lana stare at their new madam in stunned, sweat-dropping silence. The scene sharply shifts back indoors, focusing on the elegantly engraved nameplate of Flora Astley. Cyril stands professionally at attention, delivering his thorough observation report directly to Lord Alfred in the quiet study. A massive, intricately carved grandfather clock ticks heavily in the corner, marking the tense passage of time. Staring out the window, Alfred recalls speaking directly to Flora's father at the grand New Year's celebration held at the royal palace. He admits he initially suspected Flora possessed some hidden, influential background given the suspicious conditions surrounding her marriage. Discovering she arrived with practically nothing, he hurriedly sent Lana to buy her clothes, immediately realizing her father's motives were purely financial. Her father hypocritically claimed she was sickly and emotionally unwell, begging Alfred to let her live happily for just 1 year. Despite her father's dark claims, Alfred notes that Flora's refined speech, beautiful features, and graceful expressions completely contradict the rumors. However, he grimly acknowledges that her dangerously thin frame and unusually short hair are entirely unnatural for an unmarried noblewoman. Pondering the strange inconsistencies, his mind races as he questions the true, hidden state of her past. He bitterly recalls her wedding outfit, noting that while her necklace was exquisite, her dress felt tragically homemade. Listening intently to his lord's dark deductions, Cyril grimly confirms that such a tragic possibility certainly exists. Stepping forward with genuine concern, Cyril directly asks Alfred if he believes Flora was a severely abused child. Brushing off the heavy question, Alfred coldly insists there is absolutely no point in worrying about her past. He rationalizes his emotional distance by stating she will leave in a year, arguing that having Lana keep watch over her is more than enough. Cyril counters that Flora completely lacks any sense of expected misery, instead displaying an unusually carefree and bright demeanor. Observing his childhood friend, Alfred silently notes that Cyril is normally strict but acts surprisingly gentle around women. He deduces that Cyril feels entirely uncomfortable with his assigned task of secretly monitoring the innocent Flora. Recalling Lana's overly enthusiastic reports, Alfred realizes the stern maid has already taken an excessive liking to her new madam. This starkly contrasts with Lana's usual behavior, as she normally delivers her spy reports with obvious, icy displeasure. Alfred exhales a small sigh of relief, thankful that Flora is at least not the type to manipulate him with her body. Despite feeling guilty for forcing his staff into an unpleasant espionage role, he firmly prioritizes defending the Granville family against magical beasts. Refusing to play the righteous saint, the hardened lord coldly defends his ruthless survival tactics. Cyril calmly acknowledges Alfred's deep disapproval of taking a temporary, time-limited wife under such chaotic circumstances. Cutting straight to the heart of the matter, Cyril quietly asks the brooding lord how he truly sees Flora. Staring blankly ahead, Alfred offers a single, bewildered observation, bluntly calling his new wife a bit unusual. Cyril warmly praises her cheerful disposition, believing her to be remarkably kind despite her obviously troubled family environment. He recounts how deeply grateful Flora felt toward the Margraves who bravely protected the perilous castle from monstrous beasts. Listening quietly, Alfred remains deeply stunned that both Cyril and Lana warmed up to someone so incredibly fast. Smiling fondly at the memory of their pleasant stroll, Cyril happily admits that spending time with her was genuinely enjoyable. Realizing they went for a walk together, Alfred questions her composure, admitting her honesty is likable but still highly suspicious. Smirking knowingly, Cyril teases his lord for finally showing his true colors, playfully calling his secret stalking a bit creepy. Flustered, Alfred immediately denies taking any personal interest in her, prompting a highly skeptical response from his smiling aide. Scrambling for an excuse, the lord defensively claims he was merely inspecting the estate walls when he happened to overhear their voices. Deflecting the teasing, Alfred asks about their conversation, looking entirely baffled when Cyril mentions Flora finding wild plants delicious. Pressing for more strange details, Cyril ominously mentions the moment Flora spotted the cute little bird. While Alfred horrifyingly wonders if abuse forced her to eat grass, Cyril shudders at the memory, confirming the raw weed tasted absolutely awful. Nodding in agreement, Cyril smoothly shifts the topic, asking if the brooding lord is ensuring Flora receives properly nourishing meals. Startled by the sudden question, Alfred vividly recalls Flora's shocking declaration that the raw bird looked absolutely delicious. Cyril calmly explains they diligently prepare larger portions of her favorite foods, strictly following Alfred's concerned orders to provide highly nutritious meals whenever possible. Smirking knowingly, the observant aide presses his silently processing lord for any other suspicious details regarding the young madam's strange behavior. Releasing a heavy, utterly exhausted sigh, Alfred mutters that desiring a properly grilled dish is normal, completely failing to understand her raw cravings. Cyril cheerfully reassures him that Flora genuinely enjoys her generous feasts, happily polishing off absolutely every single meal placed before her. Connecting her wild appetite to practical skills, Cyril cleverly suggests that her fierce desire for the bird simply proves a deep, hidden fondness for hunting. He firmly notes that despite the malicious rumors of her frailty, Flora actually appears incredibly healthy and vibrantly energetic in both body and mind. Alfred coldly accuses his smiling aide of deeply enjoying the chaotic situation, while Cyril playfully guarantees she harbors absolutely no dark intentions to assassinate the Margrave. Dropping a massive bombshell, Cyril reveals that the supposedly delicate bride officially requested direct permission to purchase a deadly crossbow. A brief, radiant vision of the beautifully refined Flora flashes through Alfred's mind, clashing violently with the terrifying image of her wielding a heavy weapon. Meanwhile, out in the vibrant world, Flora's bright eyes sparkle with undeniable, breathtaking excitement as she begins her thrilling new adventure. Stepping eagerly into the bustling streets alongside the vigilant Lana, Flora marvels in pure, wide-eyed wonder during her very first visit to the domain's lively castle town. Guiding the awestruck group through the busy thoroughfare, Cyril confidently points out their highly anticipated, specialized destination. Taking in the heavily armored surroundings, Flora acutely observes that a town constantly threatened by magical beasts naturally boasts an impressive array of exceptionally fine weapons. A rugged, iron-forged sign depicting sharply crossed arrows proudly declares the imposing storefront as a dedicated, high-quality weaponry shop. Stepping inside the dimly lit armory, Flora immediately locks her intense, fascinated gaze onto a sleek, masterfully crafted crossbow resting on the wooden counter. Turning her bright, eager eyes toward the grizzled shopkeeper, the delicate noblewoman instantly demands to see his finest selection of deadly crossbows. Shocked by the sheer variety, she marvels at the extensive arsenal while the highly accommodating shopkeeper smoothly guides her deeper into the heavily stocked shop. She decisively requests two distinct weapons, one boasting devastating high power and another built for smooth handling, leaving the merchant stunned as he asks if she intends to wield them herself. Gripping a familiar, sturdy wooden frame with expert confidence, she casually reveals that this exact model precisely matches the deadly weapon she utilized in the past. Eager to satisfy his surprising new client, the smiling merchant proudly presents a massive, heavily reinforced crossbow built for pure, unadulterated stopping power. He thoroughly explains the complex geared handle mechanism required to painstakingly draw the immense string, noting its devastating power heavily trades off with a fatally slow reload time. Watching her flawlessly inspect the heavy, mechanical weapon, the impressed shopkeeper happily praises her clearly seasoned, expert handling of the dangerous gear. Testing the immense tension with quiet determination, Flora confidently declares she possesses enough hidden strength to successfully crank back the heavy bowstring. Comparing it to her older gear, she reminisces about aggressively stepping into a stirrup to manually rip the string back, completely surprising the nearby staff with her rugged past. Decisively claiming the heavy-duty weapon as her primary purchase, she strategically requests a second, faster-loading crossbow to perfectly balance her tactical arsenal. The merchant eagerly unveils a sleek, cutting-edge model, demonstrating how a brilliantly designed rear lever effortlessly engages a hooked rod to instantly draw the string. He enthusiastically pitches the advanced lever principle that allows rapid, seamless reloading without dismantling the weapon, perfectly suiting a swift and mobile shooter. Immediately sold on the highly efficient, rapid-fire design, Flora firmly locks in her second deadly purchase without a single moment of hesitation. Analyzing its tactical value, she concludes the swift weapon is absolutely ideal for rapid self-defense, effectively intimidating foes or swiftly hunting down small, agile prey. Stepping back out into the bright, sunlit streets, the group shares a warm, highly satisfied exchange after flawlessly securing the heavy, lethal armaments. The grateful merchant cheerfully calls out his deep thanks, his voice echoing warmly under the rugged iron sign of the heavily stocked weapons shop. Wandering further into the lively market, the trio approaches a bustling, smoke-filled food stall where a burly vendor expertly grills massive chunks of juicy, sizzling meat. Two thick, perfectly charred skewers of richly glistening beef practically radiate a divine, mouth-watering aura in the middle of the busy marketplace. Flora's eyes widen into massive, sparkling orbs of pure, unadulterated joy as the vendor hands her the heavy, steaming skewer of freshly roasted meat. Sitting peacefully together on a quiet wooden bench, the entire group happily bites into their savory treats, completely surrounded by a warm, blissful, and sparkling atmosphere. Chewing with radiant delight, Flora warmly expresses how sharing a hot, delicious meal with companions makes everything infinitely more enjoyable. Blushing deeply with immense gratitude, she respectfully bows her head and fiercely thanks her kind companions for generously treating her to the fantastic food. Utilizing her sharp intellect, Flora astutely deduces that the easy availability of expensive beef at mere street stalls strongly indicates the local citizens are incredibly prosperous. Her bright smile abruptly fades as dark, melancholy thoughts invade her mind, silently wondering about the current, tragic state of her own rundown, deeply impoverished homeland. Startled violently out of her grim flashback by Lana's deeply concerned voice, Flora hastily waves her hands and forcefully pushes down her dark memories with a fake smile. Shifting the conversation back to the vibrant town, she passionately asserts that the citizens' cheerful prosperity directly stems from their absolute, unshakable trust in the fiercely protective Knight Order. She deeply honors the long, unbroken legacy of the brave Margraves, expressing profound, genuine respect for the generations of warriors who successfully defended this land. Gazing softly at the bustling, fearless crowds, she warmly praises the brilliantly lively town where everyday people live completely unburdened by the terrifying shadow of magical beasts. Resting her delicate hands gently on her lap, Flora looks up with wide, beautifully sincere eyes, radiating a quiet, undeniable inner strength. Deeply moved by her profound understanding, Cyril proudly declares that serving such an incredibly compassionate, insightful madam is his absolute greatest fortune as a loyal knight. Touched by his fierce, unwavering loyalty, Flora's beautiful eyes soften with pure, sparkling emotion as she whispers a deeply heartfelt thanks. The towering, heavily fortified stone walls of the grand castle loom majestically in the distance, silently watching over the peaceful, bustling town below. Staring back at the immense fortress, she silently vows with unbreakable resolve to be the absolute best Marchioness possible for her loyal people, even if she inevitably leaves in a single year. Staring intensely with piercing eyes, Alfred stands squarely in the grand doorway. Startled by the sudden attention, Flora and her maid Lana halt abruptly in the stone corridor. Furrowing his brow with a sharp gaze, the imposing lord bluntly questions if she bought the new weapons specifically for hunting. He smoothly commands that her deadly new arsenal be securely stored together inside the heavily fortified armory. Acknowledging her surprising purchase, the stoic lord calmly notes her newly acquired crossbows. Sweating nervously under his heavy stare, Flora mentally panics over whether her terrifying husband has uncovered her secrets. Squinting with deep skepticism, Alfred demands to know why a delicate noblewoman would ever engage in dangerous hunting. Desperate to justify her extreme armaments, she fiercely argues that she learned to hunt strictly for health and vital self-defense. Clutching the heavy weapon box tightly to her chest, she boldly declares her unyielding readiness to repel any magical beast that dares attack the castle. Staring ahead with breathtaking resolve, her bright eyes blaze with a fierce, undeniable courage. Taken aback by her surprisingly fierce spirit, Alfred openly praises her incredibly valiant declaration. Smirking faintly, he easily sees through her bluff by noting that refined noble ladies simply do not hunt. He confidently assures her that she will absolutely never face a terrifying scenario requiring her to fire a crossbow at monstrous beasts. Showcasing his unshakable authority, the Lord details how his elite Knight Order aggressively monitors the dangerous northern fortress to instantly slaughter any encroaching threats. Eager to display his formidable defenses, he suddenly offers to take her up to the high castle roof to view the great northern wall. Grasping the hilt of his heavy sword, Alfred softly admits that he genuinely respects her surprising courage. A devastatingly gentle, almost unnoticeable smile graces the usually cold and unreadable lord's face. Turning sharply on his heel to lead the way, he commands her to follow him into the sprawling fortress. Beaming with a radiantly flushed smile, Flora eagerly accepts his deeply unexpected invitation. Her heart fluttering wildly, she happily realizes this marks the very first time her fearsome husband has personally invited her anywhere. Bowing gracefully, The fiercely loyal Lana swiftly volunteers to prepare warm tea for their return. The grand, sweeping spiral of the stone staircase stretches dramatically upward toward the towering castle roof. Ascending the massive stone steps side by side, the noble couple climbs higher into the frigid, imposing fortress. Following closely behind his broad shoulders, a warm surge of undeniable happiness fills Flora's chest. Gesturing to the cavernous space, Alfred explains the sheer scale allows heavily mounted soldiers to charge upward during brutal emergencies. Gazing around in absolute awe, she marvels at the towering ceilings and incredibly wide defensive architecture. Stepping out into the biting wind, Alfred firmly points out the strategic vantage point used by elite archers to rain death upon invading beasts. Stepping up beside him on the high stone battlements, her eyes widen as she takes in the breathtaking view of the harsh domain. Averting his intense gaze slightly, the stoic Lord acts surprisingly shy while standing so closely beside his beautiful wife. Spotting the heavy artillery lining the frozen walls, Flora instantly recognizes the devastating mounted crossbows. Extending a gloved hand outward, Alfred smoothly directs her attention toward the vast, snow-covered horizon. Marveling at the colossal, snow-dusted barricade, she listens in sheer awe as he details the century-long struggle to construct the great defensive wall. Pointing out the heavily guarded perimeter, he firmly states that repelling the monstrous hordes remains the absolute, unyielding duty of his knights. Reacting to her fearful question about scaling beasts, a shimmering magical barrier is revealed perfectly sealing the fortress from horrific invasions. Connecting the tactical dots with sharp intellect, Flora shockingly realizes their very own castle acts as a massive, deliberate bait to lure the monsters. Confirming her grim deduction, Alfred fiercely explains how they ignite signal fires to violently crush any massive hordes drawn toward the populated fortress. He darkly recounts terrifying local legends of a massive, sky-darkening magical beast known as a deadly wyvern. Staring up at the pale sky, she nervously processes the terrifying reality that massive, winged monstrosities occasionally strike their lands. Leaning against the cold stone, Alfred calmly narrates the bloody myth of a monstrous beast fleeing the domain riddled with heavy arrows. He proudly shares the epic 50-year-old tale of his brave great-grandfather completely slaughtering the devastating, mutated monster. Lowering her gaze thoughtfully, Flora deeply absorbs the incredibly heavy, blood-soaked history of the brave Granville family. Turning his sharp eyes back toward the horizon, Alfred casually dismisses the ancient threat as entirely dead and gone. Radiating an aura of absolute invincibility, he fiercely vows that his elite knights will instantly obliterate absolutely any monster that dares to appear. Gripping her ribbon tightly with trembling hands, she anxiously confesses that the mere thought of a flying magical beast sounds completely terrifying. Gazing up at her incredibly powerful husband, her wide eyes search his stoic face for reassurance against the monstrous threats. Staring down at her with intense, protective sincerity, he firmly orders her not to worry about a single thing. Her beautiful eyes welling up with sparkling, profound emotion, she looks at him with pure, undeniable gratitude. Blushing furiously and turning away in a sharp panic, Alfred desperately denies worrying about her while Flora simply smiles in deep appreciation. Leaning in with a playful, totally radiant smirk, she happily teases her incredibly flustered, fiercely protective husband. Sweating nervously and wildly scratching his head, the terrifying Margrave completely loses his stoic composure in the face of her gentle teasing. Staring at the stack of borrowed texts, Flora resolves to diligently study magical beasts herself. Heavy, leather-bound tomes rest silently on the desk waiting to reveal their terrifying secrets. Intricate ceiling molding casts long shadows across the quiet, dimly lit study. The grim text reveals that the beasts possess incredibly tough bodies, making regular bows entirely useless against them. A terrifying illustration depicts horrific magical beasts violently devouring humans alive. Trembling slightly, Flora's wide eye reflects sheer terror as she absorbs the horrifying realities of the domain. Dark thoughts race through her mind as she realizes Lord Alfred constantly fights against these terrifyingly dangerous monsters. Gripping her dress tightly, she stares blankly ahead with a pale, deeply distressed expression. Restlessly shifting beneath her plush blankets, she struggles to find comfort in the dark bedroom. Staring at the tall bedpost, she nervously whispers her overwhelming worry into the silent night. Her anxious mind fixates on the terrifying possibility of him deploying to the perilous northern fortress. She sadly reminisces about their enjoyable daytime conversation before he abruptly locked himself away in his office. Staring wide-eyed at the ceiling, she wonders if the frightening books completely ruined her ability to sleep. Her racing thoughts suddenly pivot to wondering if Lord Alfred also enjoyed the delicious hamburger steak for dinner. Squeezing her eyes shut, she releases a soft sigh while trying desperately to force herself into a peaceful slumber. A pang of melancholy strikes as she questions if she can ever return to her lonely life after this comfortable year ends. Her stomach suddenly lets out a loud growl, shamelessly demanding more food despite the massive dinner she already devoured. Clutching her rumbling stomach in the darkness, she officially gives up on falling asleep anytime soon. Sitting up with newfound determination, she decisively plans to go hunting so her sharp crossbow skills never dull. Reaching out with a delicate hand, she grasps the heavy iron lantern to illuminate her late-night excursion. A sudden, delightful thought crosses her mind as she recalls the luxurious hot spring is always available. Abandoning her hunting plans, she happily decides to indulge in the absolute luxury of a midnight bath. Standing naked before the mirror, she carefully observes her figure and happily notes she has gained a little weight. She quietly inspects her smooth legs, silently acknowledging the dramatic physical changes since her arrival. Touching her soft cheek with sparkling eyes, she beams brightly at looking so much healthier and prettier. A warm lantern casts a gentle, flickering glow across the steamy stone floor of the luxurious bathing room. Sinking blissfully into the hot water, she closes her eyes and lets the soothing spring calm her racing heart. Relaxing completely, she gratefully attributes her newly radiant skin and hair to Lana's meticulous care. Suddenly, her eyes snap wide open in pure shock as an unexpected presence breaches the quiet room. A low, masculine voice mutters about the late hour, completely shattering the peaceful silence. Turning her bare shoulders defensively, Flora glances back through the thick, swirling steam. The dense fog shifts dramatically, revealing the hazy outline of a sudden intruder. A completely shirtless Lord Alfred steps into the light, exposing his broad, heavily scarred chest. Freezing dead in his tracks, Alfred's face contorts into sheer, unadulterated panic as he realizes his massive mistake. Submerged defensively in the water, Flora nervously calls out her husband's name through the thick steam. Whipping his muscular body around in a frantic blur, Alfred desperately averts his eyes from his naked wife. Watching him flee, she sinks deeper into the hot water while utterly baffled as to why he looked more shocked than her. A heavy, suffocating embarrassment suddenly crashes down on her as she processes what just happened. Hastily throwing on her dotted dress and slipping into her shoes, she escapes back to her quarters. The ornate vanity mirror stands silently in her room, reflecting the chaotic aftermath of the midnight encounter. Burying her furiously blushing face into her plush pillow, she desperately hopes the thick steam obscured his vision. Her traitorous mind vividly recalls the hard, uneven planes of his muscular chest and the countless battle scars covering his body. Clutching the fabric tightly, she internally screams upon remembering her own exceptionally sharp night vision. Rolling over in complete agony, she tries to forcefully command her overwhelmed brain to simply go to sleep. Groaning into the dark room, she vows to completely banish the scandalous image from her burning mind. A sudden, sharp knock echoes through the silent bedroom, causing her to jolt upright with wide eyes. Standing stiffly outside her heavy door, Alfred's polished shoes shift nervously as he formally apologizes for the incident. Startled by his deep voice, a flustered Flora stammers out a panicked response while trembling in her nightgown. Speaking through the thick wooden door, he hastily explains he completely missed seeing her clothes in the changing area. Staring intensely at the door panel, the exhausted Margrave desperately clarifies that his intrusion was an absolute accident following a long shift. Standing firmly outside his closed door, Flora boldly asks if she can come in to discuss something important. Listening intently to his muffled response, she immediately notices the undeniable trembling in his deep voice. A heavy, tense silence stretches uncomfortably through the ornate stone hallway. From behind the thick wooden barrier, Alfred cautiously demands to know exactly what she wants to discuss. Clutching her dress with sudden hesitation, she nervously wonders if confronting him is a terrible mistake after all. Mustering her courage, she directly addresses him through the door, stating he doesn't merely dislike women. Throwing the door open with a deeply flustered scowl, Alfred commands her to make it quick while she hastily apologizes. Towering over her, the imposing lord glares down with an intensely sharp and defensive gaze. Refusing to back down, Flora stares back with wide, unyielding eyes full of unwavering determination. Lunging forward in a flash of desperate panic, he violently grabs her delicate wrist. Utterly unfazed by his aggression, she finishes her daring sentence by asking if he is actually afraid of them. Forcefully dragging her inside, he aggressively pins her against the massive wooden bookshelf. Looming dangerously close, he angrily demands to know if she is intentionally making a fool out of him. Staring calmly into his furious eyes, she gently assures him that she has absolutely no intention of mocking his fear. Softening her previously guarded expression, a warm and devastatingly gentle smile graces her beautiful face. Leaning forward fearlessly, she warmly embraces the towering, terrified lord in a deeply comforting hug. Flinching violently at her unexpected touch, Alfred stiffens as she whispers reassuringly into his chest. Gently stroking his tense face, she softly vows that hurting his pride is absolutely not her intention. Utterly bewildered by her kindness, he aggressively questions what she hopes to gain by probing his deepest secrets. Reaching out with profound empathy, she gently holds his heavily trembling hand in her own. Desperate to maintain his fearsome facade, he falsely threatens to recreate their wedding night so she can test his fear. Gazing up at him in stunned silence, she easily sees straight through his painfully obvious bluff. Abruptly releasing her, he turns away and coldly insists that she has entirely misunderstood the situation. Frantically trying to walk away, he commands her to stop as she desperately calls out his name. Utilizing her sharp intellect, she quickly deduces that a powerful noble cannot simply accept having his weakness exposed. Acknowledging his fierce pride, she smoothly agrees with his deflection and completely changes her approach. Placing a hand gracefully over her heart, she boldly offers herself as a tool for him to use. She astutely notes that an incredibly influential lord like him faces constant, dangerous scrutiny from his rivals. Highlighting the brutal nature of noble society, she asserts that hiding such a crippling weakness is absolutely vital. Staring ahead with breathtaking resolve, her bright eyes blaze with a fierce, undeniable courage. Passionately declaring her intentions, she begs him to let her help lessen his severe phobia during their one-year contract. Shifting uncomfortably in the quiet study, the stoic lord processes her incredibly selfless and shocking proposal. Regaining his rigid composure, he firmly promises to never do absolutely anything that makes her uncomfortable. Surprised by his willing cooperation, she asks if a cure is possible while he realistically admits they can only lessen it. Tapping his polished shoe nervously, the deeply guarded lord slowly begins to accept her surprising terms. Showcasing her absolute transparency, she casually offers to let him assign constant guards to watch over her. Staring down at her in absolute disbelief, he questions why she is so incredibly willing to trust him. Reassuring him once more, she firmly promises to immediately stop her exposure therapy if he ever feels overwhelmed. Baffled by her pure motives, he asks if this is repayment for his kindness, which she earnestly confirms. Squinting with deep skepticism, Alfred demands to know why a temporary bride would go to such extreme lengths. Blushing furiously with a sheepish smile, she totally shatters his serious mood by admitting she simply loves the delicious meals. Gesturing toward the plush leather couches, a deeply exhausted Alfred suggests they sit down and talk properly. Slumping defeatedly into his seat, he mutters in pure disbelief that her entire moral standard revolves around food. Sitting peacefully together across the elegant table, the noble couple finally begins an honest, open conversation. A quiet, comfortable silence settles over the sprawling study as the intense tension finally evaporates. Maintaining her logical stance, she acknowledges his valid paranoia regarding a sudden, highly suspicious contract marriage. Smirking faintly, Alfred surprisingly decides to level the playing field by offering to share one of his own deeply guarded secrets. He smoothly explains that sacrificing his own leverage is the absolute best way to earn a fraction of her trust. Touching his elegant pendant lightly, he reveals the precious heirloom was directly inherited from his late mother. Locking her sparkling eyes onto his, Flora drops a massive bombshell by confessing she possesses a legendary blessed eye. Staring intensely at his shocked face, Flora boldly reveals the breathtaking truth behind her mysterious power. She confidently explains her incredible ability to flawlessly anticipate movements and utilize her peerless night vision. Tracing the ancient lineage, she reveals this legendary power once belonged exclusively to the brave generations of frontier lords. Utterly stunned by the massive revelation, The wide-eyed lord instantly recognizes her absolute, undeniable magic eye. Digging into his deep family history, Alfred smoothly recalls a long-lost ancestor marrying into the Cartana Viscount family. Piercing her with a sharp, demanding gaze, he urgently asks exactly where her secretive mother hailed from. Connecting the intricate dots, he realizes the terrifyingly rare genetic trait somehow skipped several generations to manifest directly in her. Maintaining her stoic composure, she admits even her own father remains completely blind to her incredibly dangerous secret. Explaining her mother's strict warning, she reveals the devastating eye is highly coveted for brutal espionage and deadly assassination. She dramatically details how her mother desperately forced her to hide the eye to avoid getting violently dragged into the Granville family's brutal conflicts. Blinking in sheer shock, Alfred stares deeply into her eye as he absorbs her mother's desperate, highly protective command. Lowering her gaze softly, she vows to defy her mother's dying wish simply to help her struggling husband. The imposing lord aggressively warns her that holding such a massive secret fundamentally alters her connection to the powerful Granville bloodline. Smiling with radiantly pure intentions, she passionately declares she holds absolutely zero regrets as long as she can help him conquer his fears. Completely rendered speechless, the stoic Margrave stares at his fiercely loyal bride in absolute, breathtaking awe. Breaking his stunned silence, he openly questions why she would risk absolutely everything just because she enjoyed a few delicious meals. Furrowing his brow with heavy skepticism, he demands to know why she would go to such extreme lengths to randomly assist him. Beaming with a brilliantly flushed smile, she warmly insists that sharing incredibly delicious food alongside genuine kindness easily brings immense happiness. Gazing at him with profound sincerity, she firmly vows to violently crush his phobia rather than spend the entire year doing absolutely nothing. Releasing a heavy sigh of defeat, the brooding lord finally surrenders to her overwhelmingly stubborn kindness. Lowering his sharp gaze, he quietly processes the incredibly heavy weight of her dangerously selfless devotion. Shifting the intense interrogation, he bluntly shatters the quiet atmosphere by directly asking if she was violently abused. Promising to fully trust her moving forward, he sternly commands her to strip away all her remaining dark secrets. Pressing for the brutal truth, he furiously questions exactly what her supposedly noble father was doing during her dark childhood. A massively heavy, ornate grandfather clock dramatically ticks in the background as the unbearably tense silence stretches on. Averting her eyes nervously, she quietly hesitates before softly admitting the incredibly cruel nature of her tragic upbringing. She bravely recounts the horrifying months where her stepmother ruthlessly mocked her before violently raising a hand against her. Sitting stoically in the dimly lit study, Alfred listens grimly as she emotionlessly declares she holds absolutely no feelings for her father. A dark, terrifyingly murderous scowl twists across his face as he violently condemns her father as an absolutely worthless man. Slamming his fist in sheer fury, he aggressively roars that her tragic upbringing was completely undeniable, systematic abuse. Startled by his fiercely protective anger, she stares at her towering husband with wide, beautifully sparkling eyes. Covering his face in agonizing frustration, he curses his own ignorance while grieving the horrific, unjust torment she silently endured. Brushing off the dark memories, she explains how she miraculously learned the brutal arts of survival within the harsh forest. A warm, nostalgic memory flashes as she fondly introduces the incredibly kind Grandpa Ron who secretly trained her in the wilderness. She confidently lists her rugged survival skills, detailing her expert ability to aggressively hunt and skillfully skin wild animals. Staring ahead with an unbreakable resolve, her brilliantly clear eye reflects the immense, forged strength of a hardened survivor. Putting the bloody puzzle pieces together, Alfred finally understands exactly how a delicate noblewoman masterfully wields a heavy crossbow. She proudly credits the unforgiving yet generous Forrest for violently forging her into a highly capable survivor. Smiling softly, she remembers her loyal nursemaid Marion sneaking away to fiercely check on her after her mentor passed away. Analyzing her dangerously frail frame upon arrival, Alfred grimly deduces she suffered from severe, life-threatening starvation. Nodding quietly, she calmly admits she survived by living incredibly frugally despite Marion's desperate attempts to save her. Clutching her chest with deeply trembling hands, a sudden, violently overwhelming surge of buried agony violently strikes her heart. Fighting back a sudden wave of raw emotion, she tearfully confesses that experiencing his profound kindness violently unravels her heavily armored heart. Heavy, sparkling tears suddenly shatter her stoic facade and violently stream down her beautifully flushed cheeks. Clenching his jaw in pure agony, the guilt-ridden lord severely punishes himself for violently dragging her into a cold contract marriage. Staring down with deep, unshakable regret, he passionately apologizes for forcing such an incredibly heavy burden onto her fragile shoulders. Looking up with a radiantly tearful smile, she completely shatters his guilt by passionately declaring this marriage absolutely saved her life. Bowing his head in profound shame, he desperately apologizes for brutally ignoring her feelings while selfishly prioritizing his own phobia. Wiping away her joyful tears, she beams brightly while vowing she is completely and utterly happy standing right by his side. Radiating an aura of absolute, unbreakable protection, he fiercely vows she will feast luxuriously and live comfortably for the rest of her entire life. Passionately declaring her modest desires, she insists that simply being allowed to quietly live somewhere within his vast domain would be an absolute blessing. Overwhelmed by his unprecedented kindness, brilliant tears of pure joy stream down her flushed face as she whispers a deeply heartfelt thanks. Running a frustrated hand through his dark hair, Alfred groans in utter disbelief as he realizes her cruel family kept her completely in the dark. The very concept of receiving a massive sum of money completely shatters her composure, turning her into a stunned, ghostly shell of herself. He explicitly clarifies the original contract terms, firmly stating she was rightfully supposed to receive a staggering 50 million ordo after their inevitable divorce. Staring blankly at the staggering revelation, her stunned mind struggles to process the incredibly strange, hidden clauses of her own marriage. Gesturing with absolute, unwavering authority, he formally vows to directly pay her the massive fortune while ensuring her Count father receives absolutely nothing. Sinking back into the plush leather couch, the exhausted lord openly admits that normally, being completely alone with a woman triggers immense, suffocating revulsion. Clenching his fist tightly against his leg, he quietly acknowledges the incredibly heavy burden of his deeply traumatizing hidden fear. Staring at her with a remarkably calm expression, he admits to his own profound surprise that talking to her triggers absolutely no disgust. Her beautiful eyes snapping wide open, Flora listens in absolute, breathless shock to his completely unexpected confession. Dropping his heavy guard entirely, the towering lord formally and sincerely asks if she will truly help him overcome his crippling fear of women. Bursting with radiant, undeniable joy, she eagerly accepts his request while passionately declaring her deep desire to finally give something back. Leaning forward with boundless enthusiasm, she vows to do absolutely whatever it takes to help him shatter his invisible chains. Feeling a completely unfamiliar heat rising in his face, he quietly hopes this incredibly honest exchange has finally earned a fraction of her trust. A faint, devastatingly gentle smile graces his usually stoic face, revealing a deeply buried warmth beneath his hardened exterior. Lowering his gaze in profound shame, he painfully confesses that the mere act of physically touching a woman forces his entire body to violently stiffen. Tilting her head in cute realization, she sharply connects the dots, remembering how visibly terrified and rigid he looked during their grand wedding. Gazing at him with pure, unconditional empathy, she softly deduces that he must have survived a truly terrifying, traumatic experience in his past. Covering his face in agonizing shame, the fearsome lord painfully reveals his absolute greatest terror is the sight of a woman's naked body. Apologizing for his violently panicked reaction in the bath, he bitterly calls himself pathetic while regretting how badly he startled her. Understanding the heavy context behind his frantic escape, she gently absorbs his apology regarding the highly chaotic midnight incident. Looking down at her with a softened, incredibly vulnerable gaze, the towering Margrave strips away the last of his terrifying facade. Radiating an aura of endless comfort, she firmly reassures him that letting out such agonizing, deeply buried feelings is an absolute necessity. Smiling with a bright, welcoming warmth, she cheerfully proposes they begin his gentle exposure therapy by simply sharing their daily meals together. He cautiously asks what specific conditions they should set to effectively manage this highly unprecedented, delicate arrangement. Clenching his trembling hand slightly, he nervously prepares himself to embrace the incredibly daunting challenge she has just laid out. Beaming with pure, supportive joy, she gently suggests they take it one step at a time by starting with a simple, shared dinner. He quietly admits his usual, dreary routine involves hastily grabbing lonely meals while buried beneath mountains of paperwork in his office. Standing up to conclude the emotionally exhausting night, he warmly expresses his genuine relief at finally having such a profound, honest conversation. Dismissing his lingering guilt with a gentle wave, she firmly insists he has absolutely no reason to keep apologizing for his past actions. Refusing to let it go completely, he respectfully offers one final, deeply sincere apology for everything he unfairly put her through. Turning the heavy mood around with a radiant smile, she happily declares she is fiercely looking forward to their very first dinner together. Despite the incredible progress, she rationally acknowledges his trauma is terrifyingly deep-rooted, knowing they must remain heavily guarded against sudden setbacks. Snuggling deeply into her plush, warm covers, she falls asleep with a heart full of hope after successfully bridging the massive gap between them. Meanwhile, a heavy, suffocating silence violently consumes the dark, deeply isolated confines of the Margrave's sprawling office. Staring intently into the shadows, a fiercely determined gleam shines within the young bride's beautifully resolute eyes. Brooding alone in the darkness, Alfred marvels at how rapidly she managed to violently rip away his heavily fortified defenses. A breathtakingly radiant image of her warm, flushed smile flashes through his mind, forcing him to admit trusting her feels surprisingly wonderful. His peaceful expression instantly shatters as a dark, overwhelmingly agonizing wave of buried trauma violently resurfaces. The tragic flashback violently ignites, revealing his deeply traumatized mother who suffered endlessly as his father continuously flaunted cruel mistresses. Poisoned by unimaginable betrayal, his mother grew to violently despise the very thought of her young son ever showing interest in women. A cold, deeply fractured family portrait heavily underscores the absolute, undeniable truth that his father is entirely to blame for this nightmare. The devastating echo of his mother screaming that he is just like his filthy father violently rips through his mind before she abandons him at 14. He sadly remembers his loyal nursemaid and the brave steward stepping in countless times to violently shield him from the toxic fallout. Squeezing his eyes completely shut, the hardened lord desperately fights back the raw, suffocating agony of his deeply ruined childhood. Standing entirely alone in the suffocating darkness, the young, abandoned Alfred is swallowed whole by the terrifying shadows of his broken home. Highlighting the endless cycle of disgust, he recalls his father quickly parading another mistress around before brutally casting her aside too. The nightmare violently escalated at the academy, where aggressive female knight candidates viciously pounced on him like starving predators. The imposing, heavily fortified stone walls of the Grand Academy loom silently behind lush foliage, masking the dark, terrifying memories forged within. Frowning at the dark memory, Alfred explains he initially refused their advances politely before being forced to respond much more aggressively. He grimly notes that a powerful nobleman with a promised title and no fiancée serves as the ultimate, irresistible prey. Shadowy figures of desperate female students peek hungrily from the corners of the Grand Academy halls. He darkly recalls the obsessive academy tradition where receiving a uniform button at graduation officially binds a couple together. The chaotic nightmare finally peaked during his highly anticipated graduation ceremony. Surrounded by a suffocating mob, he violently rejected their advances no matter how aggressively they pushed him. He coldly admits that the terrifying, predatory behavior at the ceremony ultimately cemented his absolute disgust for women. Determined to take control, he planned to directly confront his father and violently kick the mistress out upon returning home. Arriving at the grand townhouse, he was completely blindsided to find the mistress still deeply entrenched and the loyal servants drastically reduced. His eyes narrowing in pure fury, he reveals the treacherous woman bribed the remaining staff, drugged him, and ruthlessly locked him in the dark basement. Trapped in the suffocating darkness, the young, paralyzed lord stared up in absolute, unadulterated horror. The heavy, iron-barred door slammed shut with a deafening thud, completely sealing his terrifying, helpless fate. Shadows completely swallowed the cold stone room as the drug violently stripped away his ability to fight back. A sickeningly sweet perfume flooded the cramped basement, violently triggering his absolute, deeply ingrained panic. The treacherous mistress loomed over his paralyzed body with a dark, predatory smile that permanently scarred his mind. Gasping for air, he violently struggled against the heavy chains of the powerful drug coursing through his veins. Her terrifyingly obsessive gaze locked onto his helpless form, completely shattering his remaining sense of safety. He violently squeezed his eyes shut, desperately trying to block out the horrifying, predatory nightmare unfolding in the dark. A violent surge of pure, suffocating revulsion permanently scarred his soul as he endured the deeply traumatizing captivity. Gasping as he snaps out of the terrifying flashback, Alfred covers his face while trembling from the sheer, lingering agony. Staring at him with wide, incredibly sympathetic eyes, Flora gently absorbs the horrifying reality of his deepest trauma. Her heart aching with profound sadness, she realizes his crippling fear stems from an absolute, horrifying betrayal of trust. Taking a slow, trembling breath, Alfred aggressively vows that the treacherous woman ultimately paid a heavy price for her crimes. He firmly explains that the terrifying incident permanently hardwired his brain to violently reject any physical contact with women. Listening in absolute silence, Flora completely understands why a woman's naked body triggers his ultimate, blinding panic. Leaning forward with a deeply comforting smile, she softly promises to stay right by his side no matter how hard the journey becomes. He stares at her radiantly pure expression, feeling the heavy, suffocating chains of his past finally begin to slightly loosen. A quiet, incredibly warm silence settles over the dimly lit office as their deeply scarred hearts silently connect. Reflecting on their shared pain, he realizes they both suffered immensely under the crushing weight of incredibly toxic families. Clenching his fist with a fierce, unbreakable resolve, he silently vows to never repeat the tragic mistakes of his own father. His sharp eyes blazing with protective fury, he firmly decides he will absolutely never return Flora to the abusive Count's territory. Staring out the grand window, he realistically acknowledges he must fiercely conquer his own phobia first before he can truly protect her. He frustratedly clenches his jaw, knowing he cannot immediately crush her family due to the ironclad financial contracts binding Sildren County. A heavy, intricate clock ticks in the quiet background, marking the start of his incredibly daunting, uphill battle. Gazing back at her gentle face, he firmly believes that overcoming this horrifying trauma is entirely possible if she remains by his side. The scene shifts to a bright, beautifully sunny dining room where the noble couple sits together for their highly anticipated meal. Taking a graceful bite of the perfectly cooked food, Flora's face instantly lights up with undeniable, sparkling joy. Beaming with a radiantly flushed smile, she happily declares the extravagant meal is absolutely delicious. Watching her eat with such genuine, unguarded delight, Alfred feels a strange, comforting warmth bloom within his chest. He softly remarks on her incredibly refined eating habits, immediately clarifying he means it as a genuine, high compliment. Blinking in pleasant surprise, she smiles warmly at his endearingly awkward attempt to praise her. He warmly notes that despite her tragically abusive past, she flawlessly maintains the elegant, proper manners of a true noblewoman. Her sparkling eyes widen slightly as she completely absorbs his deeply observant and respectful praise. He continues by expressing how incredibly pleasing it is to watch her enjoy her food with such bright, unadulterated happiness. A soft, devastatingly gentle smile finally graces his stoic features, completely devoid of his usual, terrifying tension. Leaning forward with a deeply serious gaze, he astutely points out her incredibly cheerful nature violently clashes with her complete lack of self-worth. Startled by his piercing observation, she grips her silver fork tightly as her heavily guarded insecurities are gently brought into the light. He firmly commands her to start fiercely valuing herself, passionately declaring she deserves absolutely every single luxury this castle offers. Tears of profound joy prick her beautiful eyes as she absorbs the full, unyielding weight of his fiercely protective devotion. Smiling radiantly through her shimmering tears, she happily vows to cherish her new life while walking bravely by his side. Stepping forward earnestly, Flora directly asks Lord Alfred for a crucial favor. She passionately explains that her loyal nursemaid Marion struggles to support a sick husband and elderly mother, asking to redirect some of her generous allowance to help them. The stoic lord grants her absolute freedom with her funds, curiously asking if she intends to send everything to her former nursemaid. Connecting through shared pasts, Alfred deeply understands her devotion since he also owes a massive debt of gratitude to his own nursemaid. Smiling with pure hope, she warmly prays that the financial support will instantly ease her beloved caretaker's heavy burdens. Calculating the risks, she cleverly suggests sending the money to the struggling family little by little over time. Alfred sharply warns her that her greedy stepmother or father could violently intercept the funds if they discover the secret transfers. Gasping in sheer shock, Flora violently realizes just how ruthlessly her abusive family might act to steal the money. Stepping up as her fierce protector, The imposing lord smoothly offers to secretly dispatch a highly skilled doctor alongside her personal letter. Her eyes sparkling with overwhelming joy, Flora passionately declares that saving Marion brings her absolute, undeniable happiness. Gripping her dress nervously, she sheepishly admits she only knows the general village location rather than a precise address. Beaming brightly beside Lana, the young bride warmly expresses her deep desire to let Marion know she is finally living a truly happy life. She passionately voices her immense gratitude toward the Lord for bravely taking her in despite knowing her deeply troubled background. Bowing her head with profound sincerity, she thanks him violently from the absolute bottom of her scarred heart. Waving off her concerns, the confident Margrave assures her that knowing the village name provides more than enough intel for his elite trackers. Staring up at her towering husband, Flora's beautifully wide eyes overflow with sheer, breathless admiration. Meeting her gaze fiercely, Alfred vows to fulfill her absolute every wish while passionately promising to never return her to her abusive family. Standing attentively in the background, the fiercely loyal staff proudly acknowledge their lord's highly protective command. Instantly panicking under their knowing smirks, the terrifying lord wildly waves his hands and desperately begs them not to misunderstand his kindness. Regaining his stoic composure, he bluntly commands his elite aides to violently execute the secret medical mission as quickly as possible. The previously tense room suddenly erupts into chaotic energy as the staff hastily scramble to fulfill the Lord's urgent new orders. Sitting peacefully in her private chambers, Flora quietly observes the meticulously efficient Lana carefully adjusting her elegant dress. A grand, polished mirror perfectly reflects the intimate, silent bond rapidly forming between the delicate madam and her stern maid. Blushing furiously, Flora hastily breaks the silence to desperately assure Lana that her relationship with the Lord remains purely platonic. Gently holding the young bride's delicate hands, the deeply focused maid smoothly ignores the frantic denials to continue her meticulous work. A devastatingly warm, rare smile breaks across Lana's face as she softly reveals her deep history as one of Lord Alfred's closest childhood friends. Standing tall with fierce loyalty, the seasoned maid proudly details her unbreakable, lifelong bond with the brooding Margrave. Piercing the madam with a highly knowing look, Lana smoothly questions if Flora truly understands the immense weight of the Lord's dark past. Flora nods firmly in agreement, prompting a slightly surprised, quietly analyzing reaction from the highly observant maid. Lowering her gaze, Flora brutally grounds her own hopes by reminding herself his kindness is merely temporary consideration before their inevitable divorce. Staring down at the melancholic bride, Lana's sharp eyes easily pierce through Flora's heartbreakingly practical, self-deprecating logic. Snapping out of her dark thoughts, the young madam looks up with a beautifully genuine smile and softly thanks the diligent maid. Glowing with unwavering resolve, she passionately vows to dedicate her absolute everything to violently supporting Lord Alfred during her short stay. Dropping a massive bombshell, Lana casually asks if the young bride knows the towering lord will be celebrating his 24th birthday in exactly 10 days. Reaching for the elegant glass perfume bottles, Flora's hands freeze dead in their tracks as the shocking timeline violently registers in her mind. Blinking in absolute panic, she frantically asks if the castle plans to throw a massive, extravagant celebration for the fearsome Margrave. Sweating bullets in pure, unadulterated terror, she internally screams as she realizes she has absolutely nothing prepared for the massive event. Lana easily crushes her panic by explaining the fiercely reclusive lord aggressively avoids neighboring nobles and absolutely despises grand social gatherings. Slumping down with a slightly disappointed pout, Flora quietly admits she desperately wanted to violently surprise him with a meaningful gift. Bouncing back with relentless optimism, she eagerly asks if he plans to hold a small, highly private celebration with just the closest staff. Tapping her chin thoughtfully, the highly capable maid hums a quiet tune while processing the young madam's incredibly sweet, innocent request. Lana smirks knowingly and guarantees he would be absolutely thrilled, leaving Flora to violently panic over what kind of gift to procure. A tense, highly focused silence overtakes the room as both women furiously brainstorm the absolute perfect present in front of the grand mirror. Utilizing her sharp intellect, Flora rapidly cycles through options, violently rejecting basic gifts before heavily considering a highly personalized, hand-embroidered handkerchief. Suddenly, her bright eyes snap wide open as a brilliantly explosive, incredibly perfect idea violently strikes her racing mind. Lunging from her seat with breathtaking enthusiasm, The young bride's flowing skirts whip around her as she springs into immediate action. Locking her sparkling eyes onto her startled maid, she boldly declares her absolute, unyielding intention to violently storm the castle kitchens. The massive, incredibly bustling kitchen overflows with roaring fires and highly skilled chefs masterfully preparing the domain's extravagant daily feasts. Wiping his flour-dusted hands, the burly head chef Thomas steps forward to proudly greet the shockingly unexpected arrival of the highborn madam. Standing frozen in the grand doorway, Flora stares in pure, wide-eyed wonder at the absolute culinary battlefield heavily churning before her. Stepping boldly into the bustling kitchen, Flora earnestly apologizes for the intrusion while warmly thanking the stunned staff for their consistently delicious meals. Recovering from his initial shock, the rugged head chef respectfully notes her famously flawless manners and genuine appreciation for every single dish. Beaming with immense pride, head chef Thomas heartily insists that he should be the one expressing profound gratitude to the young madam. Smiling with radiant warmth, she passionately rejects his humility and firmly declares herself the one who is absolutely always grateful. Placing a large hand on his hip, the seasoned chef proudly proclaims that seeing her eat with such joy is the absolute greatest reward for any cook. Connecting the dots with a gentle smile, Flora happily realizes the incredibly loyal head chef deeply worries about Lord Alfred's health too. She brightly shares her profound happiness, crediting the chef's masterful cooking for finally making her stubborn husband eat his meals properly. Chuckling with a knowing smirk, Thomas teasingly attributes the brooding lord's sudden change in appetite directly to the undeniable power of love. Blushing furiously at the romantic implication, a deeply flustered Flora hastily deflects by praising how universally adored the lord is by his loyal staff. Utterly panicked by the chef's teasing, she wildly flails her arms and desperately calls out for Lana to save her from the highly embarrassing conversation. Waving her hands in absolute frantic denial, the blushing bride desperately attempts to clarify that her relationship with the terrifying Margrave is strictly platonic. Stepping in smoothly, a calm aide effortlessly diffuses the chaos by affirming the stoic lord simply maintains his usual, entirely unremarkable routine. A devious spark lights up the maid's eyes as she casually drops the massive bombshell that Lord Alfred's birthday is rapidly approaching. Leaning forward with sudden, intense determination, Flora directly interrogates the chef on his absolute willingness to prepare freshly hunted wild game. Glowing with newfound excitement, she eagerly reveals her grand master plan to personally secure a lavish feast and bake a magnificent birthday cake. Sheepishly pressing her fingers together, she humbly admits her incredibly poor cooking skills while begging the veteran chef to graciously assist her. Dropping a completely unexpected tactical nuke, the delicate noblewoman casually announces her firm intention to personally hunt down the birthday prey tomorrow. A heavy, utterly stunned silence violently crashes down as the entire kitchen staff freezes dead in their tracks at her terrifyingly rugged declaration. Bursting into booming, uproarious laughter, Thomas fiercely praises her breathtaking bravery while enthusiastically vowing his absolute, unwavering cooperation. Chuckling heartily at her surprising ferocity, the massive chef promises to transform absolutely whatever beast she violently slaughters into a divine masterpiece. Clasping her hands in pure, radiant anticipation, the young bride's heart flutters wildly as she eagerly envisions her stoic husband's incredibly surprised face. Breaking the joyous kitchen atmosphere, Cyril steps forward with his usual professional grace to respectfully address the highly motivated madam. Delivering a highly unexpected message, the stern knight informs her that a mysterious man named Callisto Astley has suddenly requested an urgent audience. He smoothly elaborates that the unknown visitor formally begs for permission to directly visit the heavily fortified estate as early as tomorrow. Her bright eyes snapping wide open in sheer, unadulterated shock, Flora instantly recognizes the completely unexpected name of her long-lost uncle. Observing her incredibly stunned reaction, the vigilant Cyril quietly confirms the man's identity while checking to ensure the young bride is all right. Staring blankly ahead, she melancholically recalls how her kind uncle vanished completely on a foreign business trip when she was only 13. A heavy, incredibly tense silence stretches between them as Cyril quietly analyzes her deeply conflicted, deeply emotional reaction to the sudden news. Igniting with a fierce, unbreakable resolve, she confidently commands her loyal knight to arrange the highly anticipated meeting at absolutely any time. Clutching her chest with trembling hands, a profoundly nostalgic warmth washes over her at the miraculous thought of finally reuniting with her uncle. Bowing with absolute, unwavering respect, Cyril smoothly accepts her decisive command and immediately moves to finalize the sudden visitation schedule. Glowing with tearful, undeniable joy, she softly whispers her immense excitement to finally see the beloved family member after 10 long years. Thrusting her fists downward in a burst of pure adrenaline, she fiercely celebrates the incredibly rare, highly blessed piece of good news. The bright, sunlit hours rapidly blur past as the sprawling estate prepares for the highly anticipated, incredibly emotional afternoon arrival. Bursting into the elegant reception room with a radiant, breathtaking smile, Flora joyfully greets the smartly dressed Uncle Callisto after a decade apart. Staring at his beautiful, fully grown niece, the older man's deeply exhausted face completely crumbles under the weight of sheer, overwhelming emotion. Violently shattering the joyous atmosphere, Callisto suddenly throws himself forward in a desperately deep, incredibly agonizing bow of pure apology. Utterly panicked by his shocking display of raw guilt, she frantically rushes forward to gently force her weeping uncle back onto the plush couch. Staring down at his deeply tortured expression, a highly confused Flora desperately searches for the dark reason behind his completely unexpected agony. Slumping defeatedly into the luxurious cushions, the sharply dressed merchant visibly trembles beneath the crushing, invisible weight of his own profound regrets. He bitterly recounts traveling directly to the Sildren County to finally see her, only to be ruthlessly and violently turned away at the massive iron gates. His voice breaking with absolute horror, he explains how the whispering townsfolk brutally revealed the dark truth of her mother's death and the new, cruel stepfamily. Connecting the incredibly dark, treacherous dots, Flora grimly realizes her manipulative father violently blocked her uncle to hide the horrific abuse. Lowering her gaze in complete, suffocating silence, the deeply scarred bride absorbs the incredibly brutal lengths her vile family went to isolate her. Clenching his suit violently in pure, unadulterated self-hatred, Callisto screams out another desperately agonizing apology from the very bottom of his broken soul. He horrifyingly admits to completely uncovering the unimaginable, deeply cruel torment she suffered after interrogating the terrified estate servants. Gently interrupting his violent spiral of guilt, Flora speaks with an incredibly soft, undeniable strength, firmly absolving him of absolutely any wrongdoing. Staring back with beautifully clear, unyielding eyes, she passionately begs her weeping uncle to instantly stop punishing himself for her tragic past. Crushed by the massive betrayal, he furiously curses himself for blindly trusting the forged, highly manipulative thank you letters instead of checking on her directly. He bitterly laments foolishly believing the dark lies that she was living happily with a loving fiancé, while Flora simply watches him with profound, unbroken empathy. Pondering the sudden arrival, Flora deeply wonders if the customary thank you letters had actually continued even after she turned 14. Gazing affectionately at the familiar visitor, a radiant Flora softly greets her uncle with a gentle smile. Reflecting on her past at the estate, she realizes that Madame Irene and the dedicated butler were the ones who used to write those letters. Overjoyed by his presence, she warmly reassures him that he always cared about her and generously came all this way just to see her. Begging him to cease his apologies, Flora emphasizes that she is overwhelmingly happy simply to be able to see him again. Staring back with a heavy heart, her solemn uncle quietly murmurs her name as he takes in her current state. Matching his sentimental gaze, Flora tenderly acknowledges her uncle's overwhelming surge of fatherly emotion. Smiling with immense pride, the older man fondly observes that she has truly grown into a remarkably kind woman. His expression darkening with worry, he reveals that he explicitly heard about this arranged marriage from the loose-lipped servants of the Count. Processing his fierce protectiveness, Flora realizes she was perhaps subconsciously projecting the loving image of a father onto her uncle. Startled by the abrupt shift in the atmosphere, she gasps sharply as a towering shadow falls over her delicate frame. Leaning in with desperate urgency, her uncle implores her to leave this miserable place right now and escape alongside him. A tense, breathless silence stretches between them as the weight of his daring proposition hangs heavily in the quiet air. Vowing to treat her as his real daughter, he confidently promises to handle all financial matters with the border marquis and even help her remarry if she desires. Meeting his fierce gaze with calm certainty, Flora gently refutes the scandalous rumors by declaring that most of them are completely incorrect. Closing her eyes in tranquil reflection, she tenderly places her hands over her heart to signal her unwavering inner peace. With an expression of pure sincerity, she softly defends her new husband by stating that Lord Alfred is genuinely a kind person. Acknowledging her uncle's valid concerns, she astutely points out that if she were being treated terribly here, there would be absolutely no reason to refuse his generous offer. Rendered completely speechless by her profound maturity, her stunned uncle stares at her resolute face in quiet contemplation. Standing tall with unyielding confidence, Flora affirms that remaining at the estate is undeniably her own firm decision. Deeply appreciating his boundless kindness, she makes it crystal clear that she does not intend to leave this place now. Handing her a folded note, he promises to always welcome her and urges her not to hesitate if she ever feels like relying on him. Conceding to her steadfast resolve, he admits he understands and will respect her now that she is fully an adult. Tears of joy welling in her eyes, Flora confesses she is truly happy because he is the only blood relative who cares this much about her. The elegant paper reveals a secure address located within the bustling royal capital for her to use in times of dire need. Politely tipping his hat in farewell, he reiterates that her happiness is enough, but he will always help her if she ever faces trouble. Smiling warmly as he prepares to depart, he affectionately notes that he will eagerly look forward to receiving her updates. Waving goodbye with renewed spirit, Flora cheerfully promises that she will consistently write him letters. On the crisp day before Alfred's birthday, a resolute Flora stands in the wild outdoors holding a hunting weapon while a bewildered Cyril watches. Frowning at her worn attire, Cyril awkwardly suggests they should have commissioned more fitting hunting clothes made exclusively for her. Tilting his head in sheer curiosity, he asks if her surprisingly rugged outfit is something she frequently wore before. Hastily attempting to backtrack his critique, he stammers that she looks dignified even though the outfit doesn't look very presentable. Ignoring his frantic rambling, Flora calmly surveys the tranquil waters and notes that there are often ducks at this pond. Sweat dropping at the sheer absurdity of the situation, Flora quietly suspects that Cyril and Lana heavily misunderstand how things actually work. Dropping into a flawless, crouched hunting stance amid the rustling foliage, Flora readies her weapon as Cyril gapes in the background. Two plump ducks glide peacefully across the shimmering surface of the lake, entirely oblivious to the imminent danger lurking nearby. Peering sharply through the dense brush, Flora locks her predatory gaze onto the rippling water with absolute, unblinking concentration. Gripping the worn stock of her weapon with practiced ease, she steels her nerves and prepares to unleash a flawless strike. Calculating the wind and trajectory in a split second, she carefully analyzes the unsuspecting duck's precise movement. Exploding from the water in a panicked frenzy, the targeted birds desperately flap their wings as they violently ascend into the blinding sky. Bowing her head with genuine humility, Flora thanks her stunned companion and claims she was simply lucky to hit it in one try. His jaw dropping in absolute disbelief, a paralyzed Cyril gasps as she effortlessly hauls the massive, freshly hunted bird toward him. Quickly regaining his composure, Cyril praises her exceptional skill just as Flora calmly announces she is entirely finished. The chaotic atmosphere of the grand estate ramps up significantly during the intense, fast-paced preparation for the upcoming birthday feast. Cyril's eyes widen to the size of saucers, trembling as he witnesses something utterly incomprehensible defying all aristocratic logic. Clasping her hands in hopeful anticipation, Flora sweetly prays that Lord Alfred will be greatly pleased with her hard-earned catch. A brilliant, complex magic circle suddenly blazes into existence beneath her fingertips, prompting a frantic shout asking if she can use magic. Sweating profusely in sheer panic, Cyril aggressively leans in and demands to know if her powerful husband knows about this magical secret. Startled by his explosive reaction, Flora casually explains she is just preserving the duck so its freshness won't rapidly decline. Smiling brightly as frost dances across her fingertips, she confesses she hasn't told him yet because her ice and fire magic just makes daily life a little more convenient, lacking any real attack power. Observing quietly from the shadows, a man softly mutters about the sheer waste of the situation. Stroking his chin in deep contemplation, Cyril softly acknowledges his quiet realization. Completely caught off guard by the sudden topic, Lord Alfred asks in genuine surprise if they are discussing his own birthday. A close-up reveals his widened eye trembling with a sudden rush of flustered emotion and realization. Standing amidst blooming roses, Flora looks utterly breathtaking in an intricately ribboned dress. Her radiant, gentle smile illuminates the room as a sparkling aura dances around her elegant features. With a tender expression full of grace, she softly extends her delicate hand forward. Captivated by her presence, Alfred silently admits that she was absolutely beautiful from the very moment they first met. He gently intercepts her outstretched hand as their fingers brush together in a quiet moment of connection. Gazing up into his eyes, Flora's expression softens with a deep, unspoken affection. Reflecting on their dynamic, Alfred notes the lack of wedding-like tension and wonders if he is finally getting used to her. Watching from the sidelines, the loyal staff members quietly observe the couple's blossoming dynamic. The grand dining room stands perfectly prepared for an intimate and elegant evening meal. Deliberately refusing to look back, Alfred assumes Cyril and Lana are probably smiling at them again. Acting the perfect gentleman, he warmly escorts a blushing Flora to her ornate seat at the dining table. Anticipating the meal, Alfred notes that their chef Thomas seemed far more fired up than usual while cooking today. A beautifully baked, lattice-top dish is presented with absolute culinary perfection. The main course is sliced open to reveal incredibly tender, steaming meat packed with savory goodness. Analyzing the mouth-watering aroma, Alfred identifies the hearty mix of onions, carrots, celery, and rich duck meat. Savoring the warm atmosphere, he silently concedes that eating dinner properly like this isn't so bad after all. Breaking the comfortable silence, Flora shyly speaks up with a hesitant murmur. Closing his eyes with calm attentiveness, Alfred patiently waits for her to continue her thought. A perfectly cooked morsel of the savory duck rests elegantly on the tines of his silver fork. Breathing a massive sigh of relief, Flora quietly whispers her heartfelt gratitude that he likes it. Leaning in with hopeful anticipation, she earnestly asks if the roasted duck actually suits his refined taste. Opening his eyes in pleasant surprise, Alfred immediately assures her that the meal is very delicious. Beaming with pride, Flora drops the bombshell that she actually hunted and cooked this magnificent duck herself with Thomas's help. She eagerly explains that she kept her wild hunting expedition a secret because it was meant to be a special surprise. Utterly bewildered by her hidden talents, Alfred mentally scrambles to figure out when she even did something like that. Lowering her gaze modestly, she confesses she wanted to give him a birthday present to thank him for taking care of her. Deeply moved by her earnest effort, he softly thanks her and declares it to be the best present. A remarkably genuine, breathtaking smile breaks across Alfred's usually composed face. Flora's eyes widen into massive, sparkling orbs as she witnesses his stunningly rare smile. Noticing her completely frozen state, Alfred softly calls out her name in light confusion. Overwhelmed by her thumping heart, Flora snaps her head down as a furious blush stains her delicate cheeks. Gripping her chest to calm herself, she trembles while admitting how happy she is to hear him say that. Catching her infectious embarrassment, Alfred's own cheeks flush red as he stares at his lovely wife. Later in his private study, a still flustered Alfred casually permits an approaching visitor to come in. The quiet evening settles over the grand estate as the towering clock marks the passing hours. Glaring playfully at a laughing Cyril, Alfred quickly snaps at his aide to stop making that teasing face. Completely ignoring the warning, a grinning Cyril loudly points out what a wonderful birthday present it was. Exasperated by the relentless teasing, Alfred repeats his command to stop while Cyril smugly chuckles in response. Shifting the topic to her many talents, Cyril thoughtfully notes that Flora is surprisingly good at embroidery too. Cyril excitedly recounts how she brought down a duck in mid-flight with a single arrow during their hunt together. Leaning in conspiratorially, Cyril asks his master if he was aware that Madame can actually use magic. Confirming he already knew, Alfred steers the conversation back to the truly amazing aspects of her abilities. Delving into history, Alfred notes that while magic boasted considerable strength centuries ago, it is now weaker than modern magical tools. Staring out the window solemnly, he muses that magic is a mystical power gradually disappearing from their world. Comparing their skills, he reveals he also possesses ice magic but needs a sword for it to be an effective attack, unlike her cooling the duck. Cyril adds that she apparently also possesses fire magic, even though she humbly claimed it wasn't much power. Acknowledging the strategic weight of the conversation, Lord Alfred firmly declares that he completely grasps the underlying implications of their dire marital situation. Gazing intently at the icy manifestation before him, he notes with intense fascination that she wields the exact same formidable ice magic as his own power. Reflecting on the harsh Garland border where brutal combat against magical beasts is paramount, he realizes the fiercely capable Flora would make the absolute ideal Marquis's wife. Calculating the tactical advantage of their combined bloodlines, he recognizes that any child born to him and Flora would possess a high chance of inheriting potent magical abilities. Despite openly admitting a growing, genuine fondness for her comforting presence, a heavy shadow of agonizing hesitation suddenly clouds his resolute, battle-hardened expression. Plunged into a deep and suffocating silence, the conflicted nobleman wrestles violently with the contradicting duties warring bitterly within his strictly disciplined mind. Acknowledging the grim reality of his severe trauma regarding women, he grimly contemplates the unavoidable and terrifying complications surrounding the intimate expectations of the marital bed. Stricken by a sharp, suffocating pang of guilt, he bitterly concludes that he simply cannot selfishly bind her to his side for eternity while denying her a true, complete marriage. His pragmatic confidant rationally suggests adopting a worthy heir to maintain their political union, firmly arguing that producing a biological child is not the sole foundation of a successful alliance. Taking in the cold, practical advice, Alfred stares blankly into the distance as the heavy burden of aristocratic duty clashes violently with his own crippling personal limitations. Driven by an unshakable, noble sense of honor, he adamantly declares that the gentle Flora deserves a truly joyous marriage overflowing with mutual, passionate love. Quickly defending his pristine honorable intentions, he firmly shoots down the associate's misunderstanding by stating unequivocally that he would never forcefully impose his physical will upon her. Probing sharply into the uncertain, looming future, the associate questions if Alfred intends to assign a dedicated, elite knight to fiercely protect Flora following their inevitable divorce. A heavy, suffocating tension abruptly fills the grand, opulent room as Alfred silently processes the agonizing, heartbreaking logistics of permanently severing their fragile matrimonial bond. His stoic voice trailing off into a conflicted murmur, he painfully considers Flora's own hidden emotional depths and the quiet, unseen sacrifices she has already endured for his sake. Gripped abruptly by a sudden, jarring revelation, the Marquis questions his own weakening resolve as the mere thought of letting her go becomes physically and mentally unbearable. Grasping desperately at a fragile sliver of hope, he urgently reassures himself that sufficient time remains to carefully navigate this treacherous, highly emotional romantic labyrinth. Resolving immediately to abandon all hasty decisions, he firmly decides to thoroughly and patiently deliberate their complex, intertwined future over the coming critical days. A sudden, sharp disturbance violently shatters the brooding quiet, instantly snapping his hyper-focused, lethal attention back to the immediate, pressing reality of the present moment. Alert and physically tense, he quickly scans the dimly lit environment, his elite, battle-forged instincts instinctively bracing for an unforeseen, dangerous interruption. Approaching him with a gentle, disarming caution, Flora softly apologizes for the unexpected intrusion, prompting him to quickly assure her that he remained fully awake and vigilant. Stepping gracefully into the soft glow of the ambient light, she earnestly expresses her deep, heartfelt gratitude for his unwavering, courageous support earlier that turbulent day. A rare, genuine warmth noticeably softens his rigidly hardened facial features as he softly admits that her sincere, kind words bring him an immense wave of pure joy. Bowing her elegant head in a mesmerizing display of immense respect, she seamlessly reiterates her profound thanks with a deeply moving, quiet, and beautiful sincerity. A tender, fiercely magnetic silence stretches tautly between the two guarded nobles as a fleeting, profound moment of pure, unspoken understanding passes seamlessly between their locked gazes. Caught entirely off guard by her subtle boldness, he listens in pure awe as she casually suggests they quickly acclimate to speaking in intimate, hidden seclusion away from prying eyes. Steeling his own notoriously fragile nerves regarding female intimacy, he bravely declares this secluded meeting as the vital, necessary next step in finally conquering his debilitating phobia of women. Tilting her head with a beautifully teasing vulnerability, she softly asks if his high expectations for this unprecedented secret rendezvous have tragically fallen short. Rendered hopelessly speechless by her overwhelming, intoxicating proximity, Alfred struggles desperately to command his rapidly racing, erratic heartbeat into a state of calm submission. Offering him a daring choice of physical intimacy, she gently gestures to the available seating arrangements with a knowing, graceful, and deeply calming composure. Noting his highly visible hesitation, she considerately offers the seat directly across from her to effectively ease his skyrocketing, overwhelming psychological anxiety. A sudden, blinding panic momentarily seizes his highly disciplined mind as his darting eyes frantically search for a safe place to rest without violating her established boundaries. Astonished profoundly by his own sudden inner peace, he internally marvels at how incredibly soothing and intensely pleasant her melodic voice feels radiating so closely to his own body. Shifting the intimately charged conversation to a much safer tactical topic, he curiously and gently inquires about the true nature of her closely guarded, hidden magical capabilities. Nodding her head with a flawless, humble grace, she openly admits to wielding elemental magic while modestly downplaying the true, terrifying extent of her mystical, innate power. Caught completely in a chaotic whirlwind of profound self-discovery, he wonders deeply if his deep-seated psychological trauma is finally healing or if Flora is simply his sole, miraculous exception. Digging much deeper into her mysterious, veiled lineage, he softly and carefully questions if her formidable magical prowess was passed down directly from her mother's ancient, noble bloodline. Casually dismissing her immense, undeniable talent, she pragmatically explains that her fiery magic merely serves as a highly convenient, practical tool for basic wilderness survival and preservation. Reflecting heavily on their bizarre, heavily intertwined fates, he internally notes the highly surreal, almost completely impossible reality of their distant but undeniable aristocratic blood connection. Tracing her potent elemental roots back through history, she vividly reveals that her fiery abilities entirely skipped a generation, originating directly from her famously powerful paternal grandmother. Revealing the tragic reality of her isolated childhood, she admits her father's utter neglect before Alfred sharply questions if the Count ever knew of her vast talents. Struck deeply by the undeniably powerful synchronicity of their incredibly painful pasts, a profound, unshakable sense of undeniable destiny violently washes over his battered, war-torn soul. Confessing the deeply heartbreaking reality of her uncelebrated youth, she gracefully turns the intense emotional spotlight back onto Alfred's equally distant, notoriously cold family dynamics. Bonding instantly over their fiercely shared familial trauma, he solemnly and bitterly acknowledges that both of them were cruelly denied the basic, essential warmth of loving parents. Her voice growing thick with an overwhelming emotion, she deeply and passionately praises his relentless, incredibly valiant efforts displayed openly earlier that challenging day. Blushing deeply with a raw, completely unfiltered sincerity, she warmly and bravely confesses that his noble, protective actions brought her a profound, lingering sense of pure, unadulterated joy. The heavy, emotionally charged air crackles violently with an unspoken, fiery romantic tension as their shared, exposed vulnerabilities permanently strip away their thick aristocratic armor. Stuttering slightly as he awkwardly pivots the heavy topic back to survival skills, he is completely surprised when she gently admits a deep, peaceful aversion to ever shedding innocent animal blood. Captivated entirely by her overwhelming, uncharacteristic gentleness, Alfred stares silently as a deep, unwavering affection takes permanent root in his fiercely guarded heart. Enveloped fully in the quiet, intoxicating intimacy of the moonlit room, the battle-hardened lord finally allows himself to helplessly and entirely fall deeply in love with his remarkable wife. Acknowledging the hidden labor behind their meals, Alfred praises the crucial role others play in preparing diverse cuisine. Blushing softly under his gentle gaze, Flora quietly absorbs his thoughtful words as a tender silence settles between the two nobles. Gently reassuring her growing embarrassment, he admits he fully understands her personal feelings while internally melting at her sheer adorableness. Flustered by his own rare display of sincerity, Alfred quickly stammers to clarify that not only hunters can truly appreciate the deep value of food. Beaming brightly as she promises to always feed him well, Flora listens as Alfred praises her admirable mindset before awkwardly bringing up her eventual departure. Panicking internally at his incredibly careless slip of the tongue, the flustered lord furiously scolds himself to immediately change the rapidly deteriorating topic. Stumbling clumsily through his frantic thoughts, he awkwardly suggests that she deserves to find a worthy man capable of truly making her happy. Digging his own romantic grave even deeper, the oblivious nobleman blatantly offers to personally help her find a new husband if she wishes to remarry. Shocked and deeply hurt by his callous words, Flora sharply questions if he genuinely intends to set her up with another man after their impending divorce. A chilling and suffocating tension abruptly paralyzes the dimly lit room as her devastatingly cold gaze pierces right through his faltering aristocratic composure. Rejecting his foolish matchmaking offer with absolute icy finality, she firmly declares that she has absolutely no intention of ever taking another husband. Trembling with a volatile mixture of fierce anger and deep sorrow, she bitterly admits the sheer, unbearable humiliation of her ex-husband introducing her to a new lover. Reminding him coldly of their grim reality, she solemnly acknowledges her total acceptance of their temporary contract marriage and its scheduled, inevitable dissolution. Stunned into an agonizing and breathless silence, Alfred can only desperately murmur her name as the crushing weight of his cruel blunder finally hits him. Turning her back quickly to hide her rapidly crumbling emotional walls, the heartbroken Marchioness silently prepares to flee the heavy and suffocating atmosphere. Gripped abruptly by a sudden and jarring realization, Alfred mentally curses his own dense ignorance for momentarily forgetting his solemn, protective duty as her current husband. Bowing his head in profound, miserable shame, he quickly and desperately begs for her absolute forgiveness for spitting out such incredibly thoughtless remarks. Regaining a very fragile sliver of her noble composure, Flora quietly apologizes for letting her intense, overwhelming emotions momentarily break her polite facade. Echoing coldly through the grand, silent halls, the somber head maid abruptly announces that the devastated madam has chosen to take her dinner entirely alone. Slumping forward in utter, miserable defeat, the heavily burdened Marquis sits completely alone in the crushing, deafening silence of the vast dining room. Looming dangerously over him with a terrifyingly judgmental glare, his fiercely loyal head maid stares relentlessly down at her master's pathetic and brooding form. Succumbing quickly to the immense, crushing pressure of her silent wrath, Alfred miserably confesses his fatal mistake of casually suggesting Flora's future remarriage. Narrowing her sharp eyes with deadly, unwavering precision, the highly perceptive maid confirms her dark suspicions that her foolish master directly caused this sudden tragedy. Delivering a ruthless and completely unfiltered verbal strike, the uncompromising servant bluntly condemns his incredibly cruel and utterly insensitive conversational blunder. Remorselessly twisting the metaphorical knife, she sharply warns him that the deeply wounded Flora would be completely justified in abandoning him long before their contract ends. Chastising him without a single ounce of mercy, the maid fiercely reminds him of the exhaustive, loving efforts Flora dedicated entirely to celebrating his special birthday. Struggling weakly against his rapidly mounting, unbearable guilt, Alfred desperately tries to defend his purely misguided, clumsy intentions regarding her future personal happiness. Unleashing her full and unrestrained fury, the loyal servant completely shreds his pathetic excuse for ruining such a beautifully orchestrated, deeply romantic evening. Acknowledging his absolute, catastrophic failure, Alfred silently accepts her stern and urgent advice to immediately and directly confront the agonizing emotional wreckage he created. Crushed instantly under the suffocating, unbearable weight of his own profound stupidity, the remorseful lord realizes he brutally and thoughtlessly trampled upon his beloved wife's delicate heart.